Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Law-Splaining the Interwebs. I am your host, Nick Ricada of Ricada Law, a small law firm in central Minnesota, and I am late. And well, that's just how it is. Why is this microphone so high? Why would I move it up here? This way? There we go. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Is the new intro gone forever? No, I have not had time to sit down and set it back up. If I did, I would have fixed many things. But anyway, how are you guys doing today? We have we have an interesting day planned. Let's just put it that way. We have a Supreme Court case. Or not a Supreme Court, a Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals case that is pretty big news. I don't know how else to say it. It's pretty big news. I did a video just on the ruling in general earlier today. Some of you may have seen that. If you did, thank you for watching those. I really appreciate it when you guys do watch the short videos. If that video brought you here, if you're new here, welcome. Just so you know, I try not to be this late, but being late is kind of it's a feature, not a bug. This is a Bethesda game. And we are going to go through, at least in part, we're going to go through this ruling and see how long we can take that. It's thank you, Biden, for doing the links message so I can pin that. We've got this ruling. Let me just summarize it real quick. So, some people like to abort babies, and other people don't like aborting babies. So that's a long-running sort of conflict in this country. It's a hot-button political issue, and there's tension between the two sides. Now, there are some people who particularly like aborting. I say like, I'm joking, but there's some people who will abort a particular type of baby. And that is, in this case, Down syndrome babies. But it's not just, this issue is not just Down syndrome babies. They happen to be the subject of this particular case. But there is a temptation amongst many to use abortion as a eugenics program, to decide that certain people are less worthy of life than others. And in this case, right now, today, it's about Down syndrome babies. Tomorrow, it might be anything. Pick whatever. My baby's going to be a male aborted. My baby's going to be a female aborted. Looking at you, China, right? My baby's going to be Italian. I mean, definitely aborted. So there's all sorts of different things that people could do depending on the ability of us to actually test for different characteristics. And that is part of the the overarching question about this is, should abortion be a eugenics tool? And as we should know by now, but many people probably don't, abortion started as a eugenics tool to get rid of black people. Long story short, Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist, didn't like black people. And that legacy really continues through today. When you find out just basically where Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics are, and you find out that in America, anyway, there are more black babies aborted than are born. It's been a eugenics tool for a long time, but that's really, really uncomfortable for the Democrat Party to talk about, because they're supposed to be the pro-black party. That's how they frame and bill themselves. But when it comes to abortion, they're really, really happy about it. And I don't mean individual Democrats. Look, if you're a Democrat and you're watching this, I commend you for putting up with my content. That's great. Two, that doesn't mean that you feel this way. I'm talking about the Democrat Party platform, okay? I know there are all sorts of reasons to have all sorts of political opinions, and I'm not actually judging the majority of them. What I am talking about is, as a platform, abortion has become a party platform point for both parties, and Republicans tend to be anti-abortion as a party, and Democrats tend to be pro-choice as a party. And they've made it, both sides have made this into a much bigger issue than many people will deal with in their lives. Despite the shocking number of abortions that have actually occurred, when you really get down to the numbers, it's not as many people that like everybody on earth is going to encounter this thing. It's just not as prevalent as it's made out to be, but it's more prevalent than some people would like. So that being said, framing that debate in that way, this is an issue that trumps other issues, because if we were honest about abortions, people on the right would have to acknowledge that there might be some situations in which it's understandable that people wouldn't want to carry a child to term, and that's a valid discussion. And similarly, people on the left would have to acknowledge that abortion has its roots firmly planted on keeping Black people dead, and that root continues today. That is not a trend that has ever changed. And there are real conscious decisions made by the organizations that are pushing abortion that paired up with Black pastors who sold out their own people to this literal death factory for all sorts of reasons. These are valid points to be made. And if we can go ahead and remove that racial component today, we can talk about that racial component, and we can talk about the reality of some parents being uncomfortable carrying a child to term, and we can couch it in a completely different fashion, and that is with Down syndrome. People who are routinely disregarded as not being valuable enough to be personed. And it's a interesting spot on our society. And I think a lot of people want to just forget that Down syndrome people exist, because you either don't encounter them every day or whatever it may be, but it's an uncomfortable topic. And we've been really, really effective at forgetting Down syndrome people exist by just literally killing them before they're born. And that's a terrifying fucking prospect to me. Is we can forget a group of people because we just are so good at killing them in the womb. That's scary. And because, again, today it's Down syndrome. Tomorrow it's Republican. Like they've been doing this for years. I know you've probably seen the stories about it, but there are people who think they can genetically identify predilections towards certain political perspectives. What if you wanted to breed out anybody who might be a particular political perspective? Eugenics can do that. There's a eugenics for that. And it's Kyra, how would you know? That's a good question. How would you know is a great question. But there are people who think that they do. And this is the scary part of the idea behind the cult of, or the culling, we'll say, of people prior to them having an advocate. And again, I'm not, I mean, you can tell my perspective on this. I'm I'm pro-life. Like I'm pretty damn pro-life. Especially though, I think actually more appropriately, I'm pro-advocate. And in my opinion, there isn't an advocate for the child in discussions about whether or not the child gets to live and die. There's a doctor and a mother, and each one of those has some sort of interest. Oftentimes, the dad is not part of the discussion. The dad is an optional part of the discussion, right? If the mom wants to allow the dad to be part of the discussion, he is. If she doesn't want his opinion, then there is no opinion from him. So I don't really count that one. But there is no child advocate. They're not born. They don't get a voice. And the law isn't there actually protecting them. There's attempts at it, but there are severe limits on it. So that's where my real problem comes into play in regards to abortion. If you want to talk about euthanasia, I mean, those people have advocates, oftentimes themselves. And we have ways to appoint people with power of attorney, with all sorts of their living wills. There are ways for people to make their opinions about the end of their life known. And I am all for giving people agency over the end of their lives. I'm not one of the people who says, no, you can't choose to not receive treatment. I'm not like that, because I think that there's advocacy and agency for those people at the end of their life. Where I don't see it is at the beginning. That advocacy is always from some group of people that have no interest in a particular child. They just express their interest in every child. And that type of advocacy looks like zealotry and is really easy to disregard. There's not a guardian ad litem appointed to advocate for a child in every abortion decision. It doesn't happen. That would be an impermissible road barrier under Roe versus Wade, and they would not be allowed to have that discussion. So that's why I find this case so particularly fascinating. And I hope that as we go through it, whatever your opinion on abortion is, and I'm not actually the guy who will shame other people's opinions on abortion. I'll disagree with you, and I'll give you all of my reasons for it, but I'm not going to shame someone for having that opinion. What I hope you'll do is I hope you'll just walk with me through the case and take a look at the absolute state of abortion conversations and realize the perspectives and the potential that exists in this area of law. And it's an area of law where we're not allowed to explore or even discuss these realities without being labeled something, some sort of zealot or advocate or crazy person. And I'm talking left and right. Like, we're supposed to take these very, very delicate and sensitive questions, and we're supposed to couch them in our political biases. And that's crazy to me because I don't think these are political questions. I think they're very personal ones. And so as we go, as we really get started on this topic in just a minute, I'll share with you my personal sort of brushes and journeys with this topic, because just because I am personally opposed to the idea of abortion doesn't mean that my family has not had its particular run-ins with this subject. And I'll tell you what, it's really easy to have an ideological perspective on this question. It's really hard when that perspective is challenged even a tiny bit by a medical reality. And so I'll share with you guys the medical realities that we've had to deal with in my personal family. And I mean, I don't know. I still have the same ultimate perspective, but I'll tell you there are some really hard questions that can be posed to parents in some of these situations. So that being said, we'll get there today, and this is already shaping up to be just a super fun topic. So, yeah, we've talked about this subject before, Diamond Duck. It's okay. Um, this is already shaping up to be a grand bowl of laughs. With that, we'll do super chats. I may break up the section as we go. Here's the thing. So here, Ohio has a law against aborting babies when the doctor has reason to think the mother is making the decision based on the baby being diagnosed with Down syndrome. This is pretty specific law. That's actually an extremely specific law, and that is probably how this has actually passed and been kept through the court. Now, this was heard at the appeals level, and then it was heard en banc in the Sixth Circuit Court. So there are actually 16 judges at the appeals court level hearing this case. And the decision was 9-7 to maintain the law as constitutional. So we've got 9 judges saying, yes, this is good, and 7 judges saying, no, this is bad. The interesting thing about that is that I believe we have 5 different decisions for yes, and then 6 different dissenting opinions for no. So the total amount of paper for this decision is 111 pages, but it's spread out over 11 different decisions, which is a lot. Typically, you're not seeing that many different opinions as to why. There are a couple Supreme Court cases where there's, where they reach the decision of the court 5-4, but they don't actually have a plurality on why. They might have 3 or 4 different decisions as to why it should be a certain way. But this one's pretty crazy to have 5 decisions for, supported by 9 judges, and 6 decisions against, supported by 7 judges. It means no one's really agreeing on the specific legal reasoning of either side here. And that tells a story about, just how splintered and fractured this area of law is. And this is an area of law where it's like, no, Roe versus Wade, of course you can't do X, but it's not that simple. It's not that simple. And it's something that we, if you remember during the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, they were like, well, why isn't Roe versus Wade a super precedent? Because it definitely should be. All these other cases are. And this is part of the answer as to why Roe versus Wade isn't a super precedent. There's intense, ongoing legal disagreement in the courts over this issue. It's not so simple as saying, well, it's precedent, it's done, because there's a real possibility, especially with this case, that we could start to see protections for abortion being curtailed at the Supreme Court level because of this particular case. And so that's a fascinating area of law. That's kind of what we're going to be exploring as we go through this. So I will, again, I'm trying to just couch and frame this discussion because it's a pretty serious one. And a lot of the shows I do are full of mirth and laughter. And this one probably will be too. I don't know. I haven't read these opinions. This is a fresh read through these opinions. I'm not sure we're going to read all of them. 111 pages is a lot to get through, even if I didn't ramble through the beginning of a show. We might read some of them today and some of them later. I think I also have some other news stories. Hold on. Let me see what I've got here. We do have Project Veritas going undercover with CNN. That one's up there. There's also, did you know in Maryland, there's a ton of rioting and burning and looting over an officer shooting a 16-year-old who was armed with an airsoft rifle and a knife? Did you hear about this? Did you hear about all the burning, looting and rioting that's going on in Maryland. Let me see. Wait a minute. Have you not heard about this? Oh, that's because there isn't. There's no riots or burning or looting in Maryland over the police shooting a 16-year-old. Want to guess why? You want to take a stab at why? Why there's no rioting or looting? It's uncomfortable to say, but he's not a chosen candidate of the media. So, I guess that's uncomfortable. It's so transparent. It's so transparent. Did you even hear about it? I only heard about it because someone sent it to me. I heard about the taser because everybody was talking about the taser. Let me see the story. Let me see if I can pull up the story and see. Now he's dead. Let me, we'll pull this up. Name was Peyton Ham. Let's see what we've got. We'll check out this story to start. Let me do super chats first. There are two people who joined the stream who joined at the channel members. Two new channel members, and YouTube removed those, like it removes the pre-stream super chats, and I don't know if I can find them. Let me see if I can find them real quick, because I want to thank those people, but if I can't, please forgive me. I might have it here. Okay, we've got some new members. We've got Abnormally Average joining at the paralegal level. Thank you. Hungry Ewok and William Morrison all joining today at the paralegal level. Thank you guys so much for doing that. I'm glad I was able to find where that was, because that was... I want to always thank people who do join. It really means a lot. It's super cool to have people supporting the show and the channel and all of that stuff. So welcome to you guys. Enjoy the early access videos and any emojis and badges and all that stuff. Also, your green names and Yubnub Hungry Ewok. I had to show Lady Racket's Yubnub one time. She's like, "What is this? What is even happening?" Abel Baker and Emily Wooten, welcome as well. Thank you so much. It's really appreciated. Okay. Let me read the super chats that have come in so far, the $20 plus ones. Again, if you're new here, I don't talk about how I do the monetization stuff, and I probably should, but I don't want people to feel like there's some big call for it. It's not. I'm going to explain the rule. It's a rule I implemented a long time ago. So if you're new here, let me just talk about it. I hate talking about the money stuff, because the show is not about me asking for money. I don't do that. If you want to contribute, great. If you don't contribute, I'm still doing a show. So welcome. But I always read the $20 ones as fast as I get to them. And then $20 and higher, I try to get to them right away or pretty quickly. And then the other ones I tend to get to much later in the show. I will read all of them, but you know, for the flow of the show, it does not really work to have a bunch of $2 chats. And that's what we used to deal with a lot, was me reading $2 chats for about 2 hours a night. And that got really trying. So the $20 plus ones, I will read right away if you want to try and get your statement in. Otherwise, if you send something, I appreciate every single dollar people contribute. It really does help make the show what it is. And I will read all of them. But if I don't get to it right away, that's why. So there you go. Okay. Fac Uniga says that JT guy from Sunday Vic stream, nothing I could think of as a monstrous takedown was worse than being a Code Lyoko fan. I could accuse him of being a pedofil, but that's already implicit in him being a Code Lyoko fan. Damn. I've never even heard of the show, so I don't know anything about it. Hey, Kyra, welcome to being a super lawyer. Very much appreciated. Von Cobra says, Obama says we found the genetic identifier of IQ, not genius, aborted. Damn. Renee Villarreal says, my ex aborted our child without telling me after we struggled with a miscarriage. That really broke me down. Oh, God. That's another thing that's a really uncomfortable aspect about the abortion industry is that the men get no rights and no say. Even if they would take the child, the mom didn't want them, and the man said, no, I will take this child. I will do it. I will take it. You don't even have to be involved. The mom still can trump that. And that is, that's horrifying to me. Blasphemous Atheist says, at 16 weeks, most of the neurological pathways are in fact developed and the brain is self-aware. That, to me, is a human being with its own DNA. You shouldn't get to abort as a way to avoid taking responsibility. Creeper Weirdo says, I can predict what opinions your baby will have. That sounds like pseudoscience to me, brah. On a less depressing note, when will you review Captain Confederacy? Hopefully next week when I get back. I really am trying to lock down choosing, buying, and receiving my camera so that I can do nice, clean pictures of stuff like that. It's the phones just don't really work well for that. So that's kind of what I'm waiting on. I want to do them really well. As to the pseudoscience, I agree it sounds like pseudoscience, but there's this amazing thing that actually is going on right now in sort of the cultural zeitgeist, and that is that science as a noun is being venerated so heavily that people are being bludgeoned into accepting pseudoscience along with actual scientific results. And those lines between what really is going on and what isn't are being blurred sufficiently that, well, pseudoscience is being passed off as reality. And I'm not going to talk about any specific places that's happening. That's kind of beyond the purview. It doesn't really matter. If a bunch of publications like I Fucking Love Science say that they can neurologically predict that your baby's going to be a Confederate soldier, then guess what? Confederate soldier babies get flushed down the toilet. That's how it's going to go. And it doesn't matter if it's true because they quote unquote believe the science. And if you don't, you're a bigot and you're trying to breed little bigot babies. And I hope I don't have to try and illustrate that more. If you don't see that going on, then you're not on social media. That's definitely happening all over the place. Bad Vibe says, PSA, don't make lawyer jokes on Twitter. Apparently lawyers are a protected class now, except when the jokes are about why Minnesota is so cold. Nick's nose is the biggest reason. Very, very, very good. Yes, that I have blocked out the sun. Bill Gates doesn't need his chalk dust. It's actually just my nose. If I were to go outside, it would obscure all of the light and the temperatures would cool. Bad Vibe says, Nick, how about Bailey's bill in Oregon Senate, Bill 69? I don't even know what that is. Let me see what it is real quick. It's not 69, was it? 649. Bailey? The hell is this? Oh, okay, here we go. I don't know what this is. Increase penalties for criminal sexual contact with an underage victim if the defendant is the victim's teacher. Uh-oh. Oh no, what are women going to do? The funny thing is that won't actually impact them because they just won't get charged with those charges. That's how it's already going. Tina says, my name is Nick Ricada and I love cake donuts. They're delicious. You know what? I'm so hungry right now. I was thinking about it. I don't know if I've eaten today. Have I eaten anything? Oh, wait, I had half a burrito. That's right. My man, I am Soder, came over to my house and brought me a burrito today. That was great. I had half of that. That's it. I've been too busy. Life. Who has time to eat? We'll drink some whiskey later. That's typically what you do when you're hungry, I hear. Whiskey will fill you up. I would take cake donuts right now, though. I'm starving. Linda Marie says, everyone needs to watch MAAFA 21, Black Genocide in the 21st Century on YouTube. Mark Crutcher, a black filmmaker / pro-life activist, shows a history of abortion starting with Margaret Sanger's Eugenics on and Martin Luther King's niece is interviewed. Pretty interesting stuff. You can check that out if you're interested in the topic. Eric Allen says, I love that you aren't about the money. You help me a lot to analyze what's going on in mainstream media for trials, etc. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Super Iron Bob says, I effing love science, can predict my baby will be a time traveler and fight for the Confeds. Based. Oh, you don't know about the new Confederate uprising. It's in all the red-pilled Facebook groups. Snuggle Struggle says, a decade's worth of we need more women in STEM, and all of a sudden we're incapable of knowing what's what. Our truth and the science are TM branded terms to pollute reality. Not our truth, but the truth. Lemafau. Ninebreaker 2 says, unpopular opinion. Abortion should be considered a viable form of birth control for any reason, up to the point the potential child is capable of surviving outside the body. No one forcing / restricting freedom. And that is ostensibly what Planned Parenthood versus Casey in 1992 said. That's a decision out of Minnesota that really refined the scope of Roe versus Wade. Unfortunately, that judicial ruling isn't followed in the way it should be because fetal viability has advanced quite a bit from 1992, and the abortion restrictions have not advanced along it. And I'm not going to bandy back and forth on the point, but I will provide a minor counterpoint to you, Ninebreaker 2. The overwhelming majority of babies, and I would put it at 100%, cannot actually survive outside the womb without some sort of interventive assistance. So I don't know where that point is. That's it's not to say, well, this is a silly point, because it's not. You make a very good argument. But the question is, where actually is that point? What does that mean? Because in theory, it would mean the lowest point for fetal viability. And right now, that's something like 20 weeks and 5 days is the youngest child that has actually been born and grown, and survived significant amount of time. I think they're still alive or whatever. And we've had a couple at that 20 week and 5 days, 20 week and 6 days area. But most states still regard 24 weeks as fetal viability. And a baby born at 24 weeks is like a 50-50 chance still. It's really terrifying. And I have family members who have had babies born at under 24 weeks. And, they spent a very, very long time in the NICU. So I don't know what that actually means. And that's part of the problem with these time limits is, how do we define what viability is? And then how do we ensure that we're modifying that definition as we go? Like, is it 50%? Is it 30%? Is it 10% chance to live? We don't know. And then the other question, of course, is there are lots of people who are alive who have some sort of injury where they can no longer survive without some sort of assistance as well. And then the question being, do we translate back to the idea of, well, they can be removed too? And again, I'm not approaching that question, which I think you make a very, very viable point. I'm not approaching that blithely or pithily or whatever. I'm trying to round out some of the harder questions from the pro-life side that are responses to that. But I think, that is a thing. It's like, well, if the baby wasn't going to survive outside the womb, should you be allowed to take it from that point? I personally still say no, but I'm me. So Dark Avenger says, as a father of 3, 1 typical, 1 autistic, and 1 Down syndrome child, and wife having 7 miscarriages between the first and the second, my perspective on abortion has certainly changed. None of those conditions should be a valid reason to abort. Mithrin Emmer says, love how we have gone from we won't pack the court to DNC lead judiciary group looks at adding 4 SCOTUS judges. It's also like Grampy Joe lied to us or something. Yeah. Well, here's today we're talking about one of the issues why they want to pack the court, right? They're really, really terrified of this question in particular. So let's talk about this fun, heartwarming story of a teenager being shot by police first. The one you probably haven't heard because the teenager doesn't have the right check boxes. All right. Tetralogy says, wow, watch that nose. I'm 1,200 miles away and had to duck. I'm only okay with abortion if it's cause of a surprise baby time without consent, or the baby/mom will die at birth. Otherwise, take responsibility for your actions. And I'm going to talk personally about that baby/mom die at birth thing in just a minute. Okay? Because I think that's a valid thing to tackle. Okay, so here we go. State troopers shot and killed a 16-year-old armed with a knife and airsoft gun, Maryland authorities say. A 16-year-old armed with a knife and what turned out to be an airsoft gun was shot and killed Tuesday afternoon by a Maryland state trooper, state police official said. Shooting is the latest incident of police killing or wounding teenagers who are found with or near non-lethal guns. By the way, if you don't, you know what's going to be the solution to this, right? How do we solve the rash of kids being killed with non-lethal guns? Well, it's to take away the non-lethal guns, obviously. It's not to train the cops to not shoot the kids. It's to take away the non-lethal guns. That's the answer. That actually happened in my youth. Before we even moved to Minnesota, I had the most badass water pistol that existed. It looked like a real gun. The water was loaded in a magazine that slid in there, and it would go, and the slide would go. It was battery operated, and it would squirt out semi-auto blasts of water. It was the coolest water gun ever. And that thing got to be so illegal I think I got it when I was like 8. And that thing was illegal, I think, by the time I moved to Minnesota at 10. I wish I still had it. It was so cool, man. It looked like a 1911. But yeah, Eric's right. Fully semi-automatic water, because it was actually fully automatic. You held that pistol down, it would squirt, squirt, squirt. Squirt, 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 like a stripper attacked by police. Just kidding. That's a joke. Okay. But that's going to be the solution. It's going to be to somehow regulate the airsoft guns. That'll be the next step. Sorry for that gross comment. That was a joke from the Yellow Flash stream. There's a fake news story about that. It didn't actually happen, but sorry, my bad. The shooting is the latest incident of police killing. Including recent cases in Arizona, California, and Oklahoma. Oh, did you hear about those? I didn't hear about those. It also comes as police use of force is again under scrutiny following the shooting deaths in the past month of 13-year-old Adam Toledo in Chicago and 20-year-old Dante Wright in Minnesota. Again, here's the problem with all of these discussions, okay? If we're talking about mass shootings, if we're talking about police violence, if we're talking about whatever, Dante Wright is not a good case to talk about police use of force. Because Dante Wright was not killed by excessive force. Dante Wright was killed by excessive idiocy. There's a very big difference, right? This lady didn't pull her gun and shoot a guy that she wanted to shoot with a gun. She pulled a gun and stupidly thought it was a taser. And, some of the judges, no, I'm not going to make that joke. This is dumb. It's not malicious. There's no racial element that actually matters because we've no evidence that she was even trying to kill this guy, much less because he was black. And his blackness didn't make her stupidly think she was holding a taser when she's holding a gun. That's her own error. For whatever reason it was, it has nothing to do with skin color or excessive force. It has everything to do with a big mistake. And this cannot be included in a discussion about excessive force by police because it wasn't excessive force. Had she used the taser, it would have been right. And I'll controversially say, had she intentionally pulled the gun and shot him, it may have been justified as well. There are deadly force justifications for shooting someone fleeing an arrest, especially when that someone is entering a car while a police officer is nearby because there is no idea if that person is grabbing a gun from the car or if they're going to use the car as a weapon. And that is often upheld as a justifiable shoot. So this is a bad case to talk about police violence and a very good case to talk about bad training or bad standards or police stress and how that sort of stress needs to be dealt with or all sorts of other discussions. And it's the same with mass shootings. If you want to talk about the majority of mass shootings, they involve two things: gang violence and family violence. That's the overwhelming majority of mass shootings. And those have nothing to do with the Pulse nightclub shooting, for example. So these are incomparable. Like, you trust the science, right? There is no science between comparing the Pulse nightclub shooting with some guy doing a multi-murder suicide on his wife and kids or his in-laws because they really wanted him to watch The Hobbit for the 8th time in a row. Like, there's no comparison to these two things. Similarly, there's very little comparison about the other types of shootings because you have the Fort Hood shooting, which involves a guy going Allahu Akbar all over everybody's face. And then you have the Las Vegas shooting, which kind of looks like a Fed op, but at best case, it's some random upper middle class guy just deciding to bump stock down a bunch of country music fans, and no one can figure out why, and no one even wants to ask. And then you've got church shootings, which are completely different, and then school shootings, which are different from that. We cannot keep just lumping things. Well, we need to talk about police violence. But this isn't about police violence. And until we can have all of these things nuanced out and statistics gathered around comparable situations, then we've got literally nothing. And that's the problem, is even as common as these events seem to be, they're all still too rare for meaningful analysis. When you get down to the rarity of the events overall and then the rarity of comparability between those events, they're not easy to talk about. Anyway, sorry. I'm going to probably be going on mini rants all through the night because apparently my hunger is, I need a Snickers. Authorities in Maryland got 2 911 calls just before 1:30 p.m. Tuesday about a guy acting suspicious who the callers thought had a gun, said Colonel Woodrow Jones, the state police secretary. First call was disconnected when the operator asked for a location, while the second caller gave an address but not a name. Trooper got there within minutes and was confronted a male in a driveway. Preliminary investigation indicated the male was, quote, armed with a gun and a knife, Jones said. Oh. Here's the kid that got shot. He apparently is related to Michael Strahan. You can tell by the gap in his teeth. The person in the driveway was in a shooting stance, pointing a gun at the trooper, according to a witness, Jones said. The trooper fired at the male and wounded him, Jones added. So let me give my personal, legal, and professional opinion. Do not point an airsoft gun at a cop. Then the male pulled out a knife and tried to get up. According to the second witness, Jones said the trooper ordered him to drop the knife before firing again, Jones said. The trooper reported the shooting and authorities rendered aid to the teen until emergency medical personnel arrived and took him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. He was identified as Peyton Ham of Leonardtown. His family issued a statement Wednesday saying that it was heartbroken and shattered. The statement provided to CNN by family attorney Christopher Longmore describes the teenager as an incredibly smart, gifted, sweet young man who is an honor student attending Leonardtown High School. They compared him to the Alex P. Keaton character on the 1980s sitcom Family Ties. Okay. His love of conservative politics always taking center stage to his lively debates at the family dinner table, the statement reads. Oh. Peyton hoped to become a politician one day, according to the statement. A gun that was recovered at the scene was determined to be an airsoft gun that is, quote, a close representation of an actual handgun, Jones said. A knife was also recovered, he added. Man, I really wish there was video of this, don't you? Don't you wish there was video? Don't you want to see, like, with audio? The pointing of the gun, grabbing the knife and trying to stand up. Oh, man, I really would like to see that. A typical airsoft gun uses a spring or compressed air to drive air that propels round plastic pellets. Toy replica guns are designed to be non-lethal and can be used for mock shooting events such as team events or law enforcement or military training. The trooper involved, Hafu, was not identified, was not injured, and has been put on administrative leave pending an investigation, Jones said. Trooper has been with state police for 2 years and 7 months, he said. The Maryland State Police Homicide Unit is conducting a criminal investigation, which is standard procedure in all trooper-involved shootings, Jones said. There are many questions we do not have the answer to at this point in the investigation, he said. However, we are committed to conducting a thorough investigation to determine what has occurred. Once the criminal investigation is completed, do we have body cam footage? Do we have body cam footage? Why aren't they even talking about that? It will be presented to the St. Mary's County State's Attorney's Office for review, Jones said, adding that the deputy state's attorney went to the scene and was briefed by investigators. Maryland State Police Internal Affairs Division will conduct an administrative investigation, which is also procedure, he said. So there's the story. Shockingly, there's not. I typed Maryland riots into the old computer searchery-do and found nothing. So, I guess this one doesn't get a riot. I don't know. You know, what can you do? I'm going to drink some of this 18-year Whistle Pig. Probably going to get a little sousy. Oh, I have to announce, tomorrow's live stream will not be at 11 p.m. Tomorrow I will be live streaming with Az Heel versus Babyface. We will be doing an EFAP of Gail Cord Schuler's video where she defeats Satan with lightning bolts. We'll be doing that tomorrow. I think it'll be in the evening. We have not actually hammered out the time, but I realize that I won't be able to do a show tomorrow at 11 p.m. like normal. So keep an eye out for that announcement. Again, if you want to make sure you're not going to miss any notifications, go to ricadalaw.locals.com for free, and you won't miss the notification. So make sure you do that. Salty Grunt says that state doesn't use cameras on state troopers. There you go. God, that is a good whiskey. Whew. Ace of Spades says, as Kermit, I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees, and for some reason the trees speak in Vietnamese, but no tree will be harmed when the Lorax is armed. Aloha, aloha snack bar fed boys. Let's go Kermit some felonies. Tina says the only reason most of these shootings get any play and others don't is the media only shows the shootings that will drum up hate, so the media can turn that into ratings. I mean, CNN pretty much says so in the Veritas video. Yep. I agree. I agree. Mithran Emrys says the Family Ties episode where Alex threatens a state trooper with a real knife and a toy gun is one of my favorites. Oh, wait. Okay. So that's this story. Let's get into this thing. Okay. Off of that lovely topic of police shootings and on to the very much more fun topic of aborting Down syndrome babies. All right. So here's the opinion. Alice Batchelder, circuit judge. This is an appeal from a district court order granting a preliminary injunction based on the plaintiff's claim that an Ohio law referred to herein as HB 214 is facially unconstitutional and, therefore, unenforceable in any respect. Because we conclude that the plaintiffs have failed to demonstrate a likelihood of success on that claim, we reverse the district court's imposition of the preliminary injunction. The plaintiffs are 4 medical service providers and 1 doctor who provide abortions in Ohio. Isn't Ohio where Patrick Gosnell was, or was he in Pennsylvania? The butcher, Patrick Gosnell. Was he in Ohio, or I'm trying to remember where that guy was. Does anybody, that was Pennsylvania? Michigan? Okay. For all practical purposes, the defendant is the state of Ohio, represented here by the Ohio Attorney General and Solicitor General, hereinafter Ohio or state. The plaintiffs sued, raising a pre-enactment challenge to HB 214, the anti-discrimination law, clever titling, I guess, which prohibits a doctor from performing an abortion with the knowledge that the woman's reason for aborting her pregnancy is that her fetus has Down syndrome, and she does not want a child with Down syndrome. So it's Down syndrome, not Downs syndrome. What is the proper terminology for that? I never remember. I need to update the title if I got it wrong. The plaintiff sought a declaratory judgment that HB 214 is facially unconstitutional and an injunction to stop the state from implementing or enforcing it. The district court held that the right established by Roe v. Wade, that a woman may intentionally abort her pregnancy, is absolute prior to viability, and finding the plaintiffs likely to succeed on the merits of their claim, imposed a preliminary injunction. The proper term is your audience. Oh, God. Oh, man. Rude. The state appealed and a panel affirmed. The full court granted en banc rehearing and vacated the panel opinion. The state claims that the district court erred by deciding the case solely on the proposition that the right to an abortion before viability is absolute. Therefore, HB 214 is necessarily, categorically, or per se invalid without further analysis. The state argues that we must decide the validity of HB 214 using the undue burden test, and that HB 214 survives that test because it imposes no substantial obstacle on a woman's right to an abortion and furthers three legitimate interests. The plaintiffs continue to insist that HB 214 is a ban on abortions and that Supreme Court precedent absolutely and unequivocally forbids any such ban before viability. The plaintiff also argue that even if the undue burden test applies, HB 214 is invalid because it imposes a complete and therefore substantial obstacle to a woman's ability to obtain an abortion. All right, so here's some of the argument around this is, well, then women just won't test for Down syndrome. Right? Like you see that argument. They say, well, if women aren't allowed to abort a Down syndrome baby, then they just won't test for Down syndrome. I mean, okay, I guess. Like, so they just won't test and they'll just abort anyway out of an abundance of caution? I don't think that's a real thing. I don't think that's true. So that's a weird. I was thinking about that argument because I was like, yeah, I guess that is a natural argument. And then I was like, wait, but it doesn't make sense. Like, well, I can't find out if my baby has Down syndrome, so I guess I'll just kill it then instead of not killing. It doesn't make any sense to me. But that's how it goes. In plain terms, HB 214 prohibits a doctor from performing an abortion if that doctor knows that the woman's reason for having the abortion is that she does not want a child with Down syndrome. Specifically, as codified in the Ohio statute, provides in pertinent part, no person shall purposely perform or induce or attempt to perform or induce an abortion on a pregnant woman if the person has knowledge that the pregnant woman is seeking the abortion, in whole or in part because of any of the following: a test result indicating Down syndrome in an unborn child, a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome in an unborn child, any other reason to believe that an unborn child has Down syndrome. A violation of this provision has severe consequences. It is a fourth-degree felony punishable by up to 18 months in prison. It requires a state medical board to revoke the doctor's license, and it subjects the doctor to civil liability for compensatory and exemplary damages. The woman seeking the abortion is not legally complicit in the violation and is not subject to penalty. The doctor must attest in writing to the Department of Health that he or she was not aware that fetal Down syndrome was a reason for the woman's decision. Ace of Spades says, as Preacher Kermit, this is such a hard voice to do. My brothers and small foreheaded sisters, we must remember that all life is sacred. Can I get an amen? For the Lord has delivered you a gift, and you should be grateful. Congratulate the woman's belly and the man's cock. Amen. Stop. That is horrifically difficult to do. So there you go. The state asserts that HB 214 promotes three interrelated interests. First, it protects the Down syndrome community, both born and unborn, from what the state perceives as discriminatory abortions. I mean, they are discriminatory abortions. And honestly, like, if you're, I can't imagine like talking to someone with Down syndrome and saying, oh, that baby was aborted. Well, why? Well, because they have Down syndrome, so they weren't worth living. Like, can you, that's a bit strong, isn't it? That's a bit strong for me. The state asserts that HB 214, discriminatory abortions, namely Down syndrome selective abortions. The state produced evidence that in the United States and abroad, fetuses with Down syndrome are disproportionately targeted for abortions, explaining that Down syndrome is a significant reason for women to terminate their pregnancies, with between 61 and 91% choosing abortion when it is discovered on a prenatal test. That means that somewhere between 6 and 9 out of every 10 Down syndrome babies are aborted. Somewhere between that. By prohibiting doctors from knowingly and deliberately eliminating fetuses because of their Down syndrome, the state intended to send an unambiguous moral message to the citizens of Ohio that Down syndrome children, whether born or unborn, are equal in dignity and value to the rest of us. Second, the state asserts that HB 214 defends families from coercive healthcare practices that encourage Down syndrome selective abortions. Empirical reports from parents of children with Down syndrome attest that their doctors explicitly encouraged abortion or emphasize the challenges of raising children with Down syndrome. There are those who openly advocate for Down syndrome selective abortions. Certain countries have nearly eliminated their Down syndrome populations through selective abortions. For example, few countries have come as close to eradicating Down syndrome births as Iceland, and the Netherlands has singled out Down syndrome as a primary target of its national prenatal screening program. Academic literature confirms such practices within the United States medical community, including examples of health professionals who give families inaccurate and overly negative information, perceivably intended to coerce a woman into a decision to terminate her pregnancy if the fetus is diagnosed with Down syndrome. Therefore, the state has justifiably expressed a documented concern that the information provided by medical professionals during prenatal counseling may often be subtly biased towards encouraging the uptake of screening, testing, and subsequent selective abortion. That's I mean, let me pause the reading for a minute and tell you a story. We've had 5 children, right? And we've had 3 miscarriages before we had any children. I won't say which one. One of our children was received an irregular quad test. The quad test is a test that they do as a preliminary test, and it is not conclusive, but it is indicative of a potential issue. And the potential issue that it discovered was one of the trisomies. I don't know if it was the Down syndrome trisomy or if it was the other one, which is like the child probably won't live to be 2 years old trisomy. I don't remember which one it was. The discussion in that room, and our OB was really great. Don't get me wrong. But the discussion in that room immediately became about termination. Immediately. Like, you need to start considering the termination of this child. And, like, make no mistake, the medical profession as a whole is absolutely geared towards the idea that Down syndrome children do not deserve to live. And here's the amazing thing, of course, was that the child was completely healthy. That test had nothing. There was nothing wrong with the child at all. So, you know, so there's that. And here's the worst part. I know someone who terminated a pregnancy based on one of those quad tests. And we'll never know if that child actually had a diagnosis or not. We'll never know. It's just a dead baby at this point. Might have had the real, like, that baby might have had the really bad trisomy where they die really, really young. Some of them don't even reach a year. I think that's 18. I think that's trisomy 18. So it's like, what the fuck is this? What the fuck was that? Okay. Weird. So that was kind of a wake up call for us. But, you know, at the same time, like, we had to have discussions about what life would be like with a Down syndrome child, and would be very, very different than the life we have now. Absolutely. But at the same time, there are lots of fetal diagnoses that are way worse than Down syndrome for a child. But this is the one that people really like. They really go after. And I don't know. I've met lots of people with Down syndrome of all ages, and they don't seem like they're suffering to me. I think that's a projection we put on them. So I don't know about that. I'm not so sure about that whole idea that you're saving them from some terrible life. I really don't think so. But you know, that's my opinion. So here we go. Back to the decision. Third, the state asserts that HB 214 protects the integrity and ethics of the medical profession by preventing doctors from becoming witting participants in Down syndrome selective abortions. The intent is that HB 214 will highlight the important medical distinction between care and indifference and will uphold the public trust in the medical community. As the state argues here, an industry associated with the view that some lives are worth more than others is not likely to earn or retain the public's trust. These three interests have common denominator that is both revealing and important. Each is concerned with the doctor's knowing participation in a woman's decision to abort her pregnancy because she does not want a child with Down syndrome. It is that knowing participation in such Down syndrome selective abortions that is the wrong that HB 214 aims to right. Thus, HB 214 allows doctors to perform such abortions when they do not know that Down syndrome is the reason, without undermining HB 214's specific purposes or objectives. According to the plaintiffs, women seeking Down syndrome selective abortions typically contact abortion clinics only after undergoing extensive testing and counseling with a high-risk obstetrician gynecologist or maternal fetal medicine specialist or with a genetic counselor. In the ordinary course, the doctor who will perform the abortion may or may not learn of the fetal Down syndrome diagnosis. For example, according to the plaintiffs, women sometimes bring their medical records with them to their appointment, and those records might contain information about the fetal diagnosis, or the clinic might request medical records for these patients from their regular OBGYN or maternal fetal medicine physician. Or a referring doctor might forward a patient's medical records to the clinics wherein the referral is usually indicated in the patient's chart at the clinic. Either way, knowledge of the diagnosis is not knowledge of the reason. None of the clinics or doctors requires women to give their reason for having an abortion. Certainly not every woman offers one. A woman might disclose her reason when she calls the clinic to make an appointment, or she might discuss it with the clinic staff during the informed consent appointment, which occurs at least 24 hours before the procedure, or she might even volunteer it to the doctor who will perform the abortion. But no one contends that the woman's reason is medically relevant to the procedure, and the plaintiff's experts candidly state that it is not. This is an appeal of a preliminary injunction in which the district court found a likelihood that HB 214 is an impermissible infringement on women's unfettered right to choose whether to terminate or continue a pregnancy pre-viability, and therefore enjoined the defendants from implementing or enforcing HB 214. In assessing and deciding a motion for a preliminary injunction, trial courts balance four factors: likelihood that the moving party will succeed on the merits, whether the moving party will suffer irreparable injury in the interim without the injunction, whether the injunction will cause substantial harm to others, and whether the injunction will serve the public interest. These four factors are not prerequisites that must be met, but interrelated considerations that must be balanced. When a party seeks a preliminary injunction on the basis of a potential constitutional violation, likelihood of success on the merits often will be the determinative factor. In an appeal from the grant of a preliminary injunction, we review de novo, as a question of law, the district court's determination that the moving party is likely to succeed on the merits. We review for an abuse of discretion for the district court's determination that the factors weigh in favor of granting the injunction. In this appeal, however, because we find the likelihood of success factor determinative, we need not consider the balance of other factors. Okay, so they're saying that the likelihood of success on the merits doesn't exist, so the preliminary injunction shouldn't happen. The plaintiffs base their action for a declaratory judgment and a preliminary injunction on their claim that the right to an abortion prior to fetal viability is absolute, and therefore HB 214 violates it per se. Per se means as a matter of law. The district court decided the action and imposed the injunction by holding that the plaintiffs were likely to succeed on the merits of that claim. But as a legal proposition, that claim contains 3 flaws. 1, the right to an abortion even before viability is not absolute. 2, viability is not germane to this analysis or decision. And 3, the right actually implicated or affected here is not the woman's right merely to obtain an abortion. The plaintiffs cannot succeed on a claim framed in this way. The right to an abortion before viability is not absolute. The state may regulate abortion before viability as long as it does not impose an undue burden on a woman's right to terminate her pregnancy. States, therefore, can regulate abortion pre-viability as long as such regulation does not constitute an undue burden on a woman's right to choose to have an abortion. Even when we expressly characterized a regulation as a ban, a total ban, and an outright ban, we still applied the undue burden test. In Roe, the Supreme Court said, we do not agree with the contention that the woman's right is absolute and that she is entitled to terminate her pregnancy at whatever time, in whatever way, and for whatever reason she alone chooses. So that's Planned Parenthood versus Casey. The lead opinion corrected the mistaken view of Roe that saw any or all pre-viability attempts to influence a woman's decision as unwarranted, saying that such an absolute rule was incompatible with the recognition that there is a substantial state interest in potential life throughout pregnancy. The court re-emphasized that Casey rejected the interpretation of Roe that considered all pre-viability regulations of abortion unwarranted. So that, I guess, is important to realize, is that, again, the only advocate in the equation here is the state. And that advocate is so overwhelmingly crippled in abortion proceedings because the state is also the regulator. And that's probably part of the problem. But because the state is the regulator and the state is the advocate, their advocacy is curtailed by the fact that somehow abortion is recognized as a fundamental right, which I vehemently disagree with. Now, again, if a state wants to allow abortion, that's a different question than whether or not abortion is a constitutional right. But think about this. Your right to keep and bear arms is laid out pretty damn clearly in the Second Amendment, and your right to an abortion does not exist in any amendment. But your right to an abortion is far more protected than your right to keep and bear arms. If they proposed putting a license requirement with a training course to get abortions that would expire after 1 year or had to be renewed every 5 years, for example, that would never fly in court. And yet, that applies to your Second Amendment rights. And abortion's literally a made-up federal right. It doesn't exist. Again, if states want to allow abortions, then states can allow abortions. I have no problem with that. That's how the country was designed. Do you even penumbra? Don't you penumbra at me. Do you need an ID to get an abortion? No. No, I don't think so. In the court's most recent abortion case, June Medical Services LLC versus Russo, the plurality opinion contains a fleeting reference to viability at the very end. Since Casey, we have repeatedly reiterated that the plaintiff's burden in a challenge to an abortion regulation is to show that the regulation's purpose or effect is to place a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking an abortion of a non-viable fetus. The opinion does not refer to viability at all in its discussion of the legal standards. The concurring opinion alludes to viability twice, but without any suggestion that it alters the test. Both opinions appear to accept that the universal standard for abortion cases is the undue burden test, without caveat for a separate or subsidiary absolute rule. Simply put, there is no absolute or per se right to an abortion based on the stage of the pregnancy. The district court erred by so holding, and the plaintiffs cannot succeed on that proposition standing alone or show any likelihood that they could do so. The legal construct of viability is not determinative in or even germane to this analysis and discussion. The difference between pre and post viability does not change the purpose, legitimacy, or weight of the three interests the state proffers here, nor are the effects of the burdens here any different at any point during the pregnancy. In the Supreme Court's abortion jurisprudence, viability is a concept that originated in Roe to answer the state's arguments that its interest in defending the life of the fetus justified its ban on abortion. The court held that because the word person, as used in the 14th Amendment, does not include the unborn, the state had no interest in defending the life of a non-person. But with respect to the state's important and legitimate interest in potential life, the compelling point is at viability. I'm going to talk about why this is stupid in just a second. This is so because the fetus then presumably has the capability of meaning life outside the mother's womb. State regulation protective of fetal life after viability thus has both logical and biological justifications. If the state is interested in protecting fetal life after viability, it may go so far as to prescribe abortion during that period, except when it is necessary to preserve the life or health of the mother. Okay. Fetuses have been recognized as persons in common law for over 600 years. That's right. The unborn have been recognized as persons with property rights since the 1400s. Roe versus Wade was wrong in saying that the unborn are potential lives. As far as estate law goes, and by the way, estate law is some of the oldest common law that exists, because estate law is the entire reason that we have a common law system. Believe it or not, the king used to own literally everything. Right? The King of England owned all of England, and you lived on a particular plot at his grace. You didn't own that plot. If you died, your family didn't inherit that plot unless the king decided that your family inherited that plot. And if the king wanted to remove that plot, he could. Property rights are the foundation of the common law because they said, wait a minute, this cannot be. People need some level of permanence and transference to the next generation. That's the only way we can have some sort of justice in society, is that if the dad of the family dies, the whole family isn't automatically removed. Someone else is a successor in interest. And pre-born babies were recognized as legitimate successors in interest at some point. And that some point goes way back, centuries, long before the founding of America. So to read that person and the possession of rights is exclusive of the unborn is to ignore common law that has existed for centuries. This is one of the reasons why Roe versus Wade is such a bad decision. It's because it ignores very well-established common law. But believe it or not, even the non-scientific people of the 14, 15, 1600s who are developing property rights and developing the entire system upon which our legal system would be based they did know that there was a period of time where a woman got pregnant and would have a baby, and that it was predictable. And they were never, ever confused about what the semen shot into a woman would eventually become. Like, when you nut inside and then the belly starts to grow, everybody knows what's coming out. No one thinks that that's something other than a person. And it's amazing to me that we have somehow retconned basic biological reality into this weird, complex question of when that fetus becomes a person. Now, they did have different understandings of fetal viability. They did have different understandings of when abortions were appropriate. Abortificants have been around for a very long time, various herbs and things that would terminate a pregnancy. I'm not saying that they had the same views on abortion at all. But this idea that science has somehow enlightened us, that that is less than a person, people hundreds of years ago with nothing even conceptually near an X-ray knew that that growing belly meant a baby person was going to come out. Not like a fucking tree or a stone or a head of broccoli or something like that. It was definitely going to be a person. They weren't even confused, despite the massive number of white chicks, that a dog might come out. They knew that wasn't going to happen either. It was going to be a baby person. It always is. It always was. And it's crazy that we've somehow said, well, that's not really a person, though. That's not really a person. It's always been a person. It's never not been a person. In fact, if you go back to the real dumb times and you grunt, what's in that weird hairy woman's stomach? The grunt back is baby. Like, they know that's a person. Real quick, we figured it out. Because we really like having sex with people. That's been true forever. Like, never was there a time in human history where they're like, you know what I don't like? I don't like getting that nut. That's not a thing. And they very quickly found out the consequences of that. They very quickly found it out. And those consequences were pretty consistent. In fact, everybody they know, they're like, hey, what happened? What happened after you hit it with Helga over there? Oh, weird. A baby came out like, I don't know, sometime later, like 8-9 months, something like that. And it's like, oh man, me too. And Bob and Bill and Eric and Mike and Jimmy, all of us. Which, shockingly, it's always this 9-month window, except for Todd. He got 6 months, sucker. Or no, Lucky, she got thin again much quicker. No, like, it's always been this way. And we can't, somehow, we've determined that we're so fucking smart that other prior people never figured this out. It's the weirdest thing. I don't know how we got so smart that we made everybody else dumber than they are, but it makes us look really stupid to take on these positions. And this is, of course, completely irrespective of the question of whether the propriety of abortion, right? This is about fetal viability and our ideas about human gestation, which we've known about this forever. Predictability was part of survivability. Okay. So anyway, sorry, I get triggered by the potential life argument because it's not a potential life. It's life. You just have to be okay with ending it. And if you are, that's fine. There's a real logical argument for ending life all over the place. But let's not lie about what it is. Oh, guys, I have to show you something. Do you remember yesterday we were talking about Jacob Blake, and he said he was worried that they would that the cop would put his head on his neck. We actually have a photo of this happening in real life. There it is. There we go. This is what Jacob Blake was concerned with. Sorry, I forgot to. I should have warned people. Jacob Blake knew about this historical event that happened. This is what he was concerned with. The guy who made this, I think Ace Brain, you ain't right. You are not right, buddy. We're doing that. Okay. Damn. That was brutal. Pixlexia, I can't show your picture because your picture is racist. All right, Cringe Lord says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. If fetus is person, anti-abortion is forced servitude. It's not, though, because nobody forced them to do it. Nobody forced the conception. I mean, I guess you could argue in cases of rape, the conception was forced, but that's such a massively small number that it's almost embarrassing to actually talk about. Because not only is it a small number, it's also an overreported number. Because when you label the abortion as a result of rape or incest, there's no more questions asked. So shockingly, some people lie about it to avoid the questions. Holy racist. Wow. So abortion death is wrong, but George Floyd death is funny. No, George Floyd's death is not funny. Jacob Blake saying that he was afraid the cop was going to put his head on his neck is funny. Yeah. That actually was funny. Because a cop was not going to put his head on Jacob Blake's neck in some sort of weird headstand. Lighten up. Lighten up. Levity is allowed. But also, abortion death is wrong is completely unrelated to something being funny. And my perspective, by the way, abortion can be funny too. I'm a dark humor asshole all day. You're not going to find like some place where I'm like, whoa, that joke's off limits. Nope, all jokes are fine. Comedy is comedy. And if you don't understand that, get out. This is not the channel for you. This is not the channel for you, and you will not be missed. As an FYI. I say that as a service to you. If you're going to stand around and be mad at a joke, leave. What about jokes about Jack Daniels being good? Those aren't jokes, and they will be treated with extreme prejudice. You will be shot on sight. You know comedy. I am not comedy. Now you are telling jokes. I get it. Cool. Have fun being here. It's going to go well for you. No, 13th Amendment involuntary servitude is a pretty specific, it's a pretty specific sort of area of law. It has nothing to do with getting pregnant and then being forced to carry that child to term. That's not a thing. In the law. I mean, you can look at it that way. That's fine, but it's not a thing in the law. Oh, by the way, you know what I find hilarious? That picture is effing hilarious. All right, back to it. E1337 Neo says, my folks had me late in life and had a decision to make when doctors discovered I had spina bifida and the risk of disabilities that came with it. The fact I'm still here makes it obvious what their decision was when the subject of abortion was broached. Yeah, and lots of parents have really tough decisions. And I will say that the medical community is specifically geared in a particular way on this subject. And that's part of the question. There's not an easy answer to this stuff. Do we want it that way? Personally, I say no. And the problem that I have with how abortion is done in this country is that they ham-fisted a fake manufactured right through a bad ruling in Roe versus Wade. There's no democratic process about abortion. In fact, the Supreme Court itself is the most undemocratic process that exists because you are when you're establishing a right, you are effectively removing something from the Democrat process. Scalia described this all the time. And that was something intentionally done by the founders. We're going to remove these topics from the democratic process. Guns were supposed to be removed from the democratic process. Speech, quartering soldiers, your right to be free from search and seizure, your right to an attorney, your right to your own property, your right to not be tortured by the government. Those things are all supposed to be removed because if you have democratic control, majority control over who gets to be tortured, guess what the answer is? Minorities get to be tortured when the majority has the say because maybe they don't want minorities to do something, or maybe minorities did something to them that they don't like. So then the majority could say, well, we have voting power over you and you get to be tortured now. The founders said, you know what? There's a list of things. We're going to take those things out of the democratic process. We just think maybe these things don't belong there. Abortion was never one of them. And so if you want to say we should have laws enabling abortion with specific parameters around it, that's the Democrat process. Go ahead, put it up for a vote. Let's have that discussion. And each state can make their own minds up. And if women need to travel across state lines to have that abortion because Nebraska likes it and Colorado doesn't, or vice versa, whatever it is, I don't care. That's how it's supposed to work. If you don't want to pay state income tax, you move out of the state. That's how it goes. If the state income tax is bearable enough that you don't want to move, then you're going to pay the state income tax. This isn't hard in just about any area of law. Abortion is one of these rare things that's not codified anywhere in the Constitution. It's not hinted at. It's not alluded to. It took multiple logical leaps to get to this place and to ignore centuries of jurisprudence and understanding and legal reasoning. You had to do all of that, and then you removed it from the democratic process. That's the problem with abortion jurisprudence in this country. You can eliminate Roe versus Wade and still have legal abortions tomorrow. In fact, they're going to be legal unless they're expressly illegal, because we have a restrictive system, not a permissive system. You don't have to have a law to make something legal. You have to have a law to make something illegal. And guess what? Abortion is presumptively legal until there's a law that says it isn't. This is the problem with this bad fucking ruling that we've been dealing with for 60 years now? Almost 60 years of this. I think it's 55 years. We've been dealing with Roe versus Wade, and it has become a sacred cow of a particular group of people. Sacred cows are always bad, even when they're yours, even when they're mine. They're bad for reasoned discussion. And abortion deserves the same treatment that every other law basically has. State by state selection of what is the proper determination for the forum. And if you want abortions, move to New Jersey or Maryland or Philadelphia or Pennsylvania, Michigan. Move to Seattle, California, Oregon, these states all likely would support very permissive abortions. They do now. If you don't want abortions, if you don't like it, if you think that it's your moral compass to avoid it, move to Texas, move to Florida, move to Alabama, move to apparently Ohio. And if it's just not that big a deal to you either way, don't move. This isn't hard. This isn't hard. This is a system we were supposed to set up. Cringe Lord says, real talk, my own mother is an NMP nurse dedicated to saving fringe viable premature births. You saying medical prefers abortion sounds like you projecting to me. No, I'm talking about the obstetrics gynecology profession. Sorry, I should have clarified and limited it to that. And I don't mean that they prefer it, but they certainly heavily counsel towards the idea, at least planting the seeds for termination. And I don't know how else to word that because it's true. And there's data around it. I don't have it at my fingertips. They brought it up in this case. There's data around the idea that they counsel towards the idea of termination in regards to Down syndrome babies, pretty particularly, and other potential defects. And maybe that's the right thing to do, but it is the reality of the profession. But no, people who are obviously in neonatal intensive care units, obviously they're not counseling towards termination. They're not involved in that discussion at all. They're there to preserve life. And if I suggested otherwise, my apologies for not being more clear. I thought I was being pretty clear on the answer. I didn't mean to denigrate anybody there. And I don't even mean to denigrate those doctors who do that. Like I said, our doctor who gave us that counseling is a very, very good doctor. And we would go back to that doctor every time that we did for 4 babies, right? We would go back to that doctor every time without hesitation. There's no problem with the doctor counseling in that way inherently. But it is a reality of the discussion, and that reality could be pressuring women into having abortions that they wouldn't otherwise have during an emotionally charged point in time, because it's coming from an authority figure. And we have to figure that stuff in. We have to. If we're going to have an informed discussion, we have to have all the variables. In this case, Ohio does not rely on its interest in protecting potential life as support for HB 214, at least not expressly. Instead, Ohio relies on its interest in protecting the Down syndrome community from the stigma it suffers from the practice of Down syndrome selective abortions, protecting women whose fetuses have Down syndrome from coercion by doctors who espouse and advocate the abortion of all such fetuses, and protecting the integrity and ethics of the medical profession by preventing doctors from enabling in such targeted abortions. Neither the intent, effect, validity, nor importance of any of these interests turns on the viability of the fetus. The strength of these interests is the same throughout pregnancy, from the first day to the last. Put another way, if those interests would support HB 214 after viability, then they support it equally before viability, because none of them depends on a distinction between whether a fetus is a person or a non-person. The plaintiff's emphasis on pre-viability is misplaced. And the issue here is not really about a woman's right or ability merely to obtain an abortion. Even under the full force of HB 214, a woman in Ohio who does not want a child with Down syndrome may lawfully obtain an abortion solely for that reason. HB 214 does not prohibit her from choosing or obtaining an abortion for that or any other reason. It bars a doctor from aborting a pregnancy when the doctor knows the woman's specific reason, and that her reason is the forthcoming child will have Down syndrome, and because of that, she doesn't want it. Now, this is an oversimplification of the issue. How do we get to knowledge of this? Does the doctor have to record a statement? If the doctor gets the referral of the medical diagnosis and finds the Down syndrome in there, is the doctor then required to ask the woman the reasoning? If they don't ask, are they recklessly disregarding the reasoning for the woman? These are real questions that need to be borne out. It's not so simple as the court makes it out here. It's not so simple. So my minor criticism to the court, like, it's really easy to say, well, if you know, then don't do it. But what does knowledge mean legally is a real question. Joseph, it's not, it says, how do they prove that's the only reason she wants to abort? It's any reason. If that is any part of the reason, it's unlawful. According to the law. Now, this law is easily curtailed, right? The doctor could just lie, for example. The woman could just not tell the doctor. All sorts of things could happen to prevent disclosure, but the doctor could not ask. The doctor could refuse to accept referral notes they could refuse to accept referral notes from the other doctors. They could make their own independent diagnoses or whatever. They could do all sorts of things to avoid this question if they wanted to. There's a way to avoid it, but that's not the issue here, is whether it can be avoided. That's not the question. But I'm just pointing out this is a deficient reasoning by the court in favor of their decision as opposed to opposed, So I try to deal them pretty evenly here, and this is bad reasoning by the court in favor of the position that I would normally hold. If the law said that a woman may not obtain an abortion because the forthcoming child would have Down syndrome, then this would be a different case. I agree. Going one step further, if the law said that a doctor may not perform an abortion because the forthcoming child would have Down syndrome, that too would be a different case. I agree, although that may be permissible, whereas the other one may not. But HB 214 does not say either thing. This leads back to the question of, what does HB 214 do? The named plaintiffs are abortion providers, acting as proxies for the true parties in interest, women who would have an abortion but for HB 214. It is a very specific subset of women. It is a woman who is pregnant with a child whom she has good reason to believe has Down syndrome, who does not want a child with Down syndrome and therefore wants to abort her pregnancy for that reason, and who wants her abortion performed by a doctor who knows that that is her reason. So what right does this particular woman possess that HB 214 would infringe, or considered more concretely, what does HB 214 prevent this woman from doing? Very good question. Let's be real about this, though. While we're talking about abortion and rights in general, abortion rights are not rights generally shared by everybody. The dad doesn't have a right to give an to force an abortion, in my opinion, nor should he, by the way. The parents of the woman don't have a right to an abortion. The doctor doesn't have a right to perform an abortion. Even if a pregnancy is going to terminate the life of a woman, a doctor cannot force her to have an abortion. Pretty interesting. That being said, what is the right to an abortion? It is the right to privacy that only extends to a woman who wants to kill her baby who is pregnant. That's the only person who has that right. You don't have a general right in medical privacy between you and your doctor. In fact, tons and tons and tons of your medical decisions have state intervention. And if you want proof of this, you get a doctor to prescribe you Adderall. Get one. And then go get your Adderall. And then try refilling the next day. And see if the state gets to intervene in that decision between you and your doctor. You try that out. How about that one? You definitely do not have a right to private medical decisions and discussions between you and your doctor unless you are a woman who is pregnant who wants an abortion. Try it. Guess what? Every time you go fill that Adderall prescription, the state is informed that you filled an Adderall prescription. Same with Concerta. Same with Provigil. Same with any number of other controlled substances. You have no medical privacy in that. You want a real question of medical privacy, you get a marijuana prescription. Yeah. See how free you are to have a conversation with your doctor about a cannabis prescription when you can even get it. Try that one on for size. All this stuff. Every medical decision you make is regulated by the state. Except woman pregnant abortion. In fact, just go try and buy some Sudafed. See how that goes for you. It's a sham right. This is the problem with it. It's inconsistent with every other thing we do. And again, it goes back to the idea that Roe versus Wade is bad legal reasoning. You can argue the propriety of the outcome, and that's where we are now. But even proponents of Roe versus Wade, who are honest, again, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, will say it was a bad decision. Legally terrible decision. And it doesn't make any sense. So I wanted to get that point out there during this discussion about what rights does this infringe on? What does it do? What is the purpose of this? Because listen out this. It is a very specific subset of women. And this is even more specific than Roe versus Wade, but it is very specific. A woman who is pregnant with a child whom she has good reason to believe has Down syndrome, does not want a child with Down syndrome, and wants to abort her pregnancy for that reason, and wants her abortion performed by a doctor who knows that is her reason. That's a very specific subset of people. And it's important to remember how something that is a quote unquote right can be so specific. Guess what? Originally, the 13th Amendment only applied to black people. And very quickly, the court said, wait a minute. I mean, we know that the 13th Amendment was only intended to apply to the specific instance of slavery of black people in America. But they said, but this doesn't just, like, this is a right. This is extended to everybody. Everybody should get this. Everybody should be able to have this particular right. Well, abortion doesn't extend to everybody. And medical privacy certainly isn't a right that you have. So it doesn't get to fall under that guise. So it's this weird thing that we determine as a right, but something like 70% of the population isn't entitled to it. It's weird. So anyway, the plaintiffs, the district court, and the dissent authored by Judge Donald all claim that HB 214 prevents this woman from having an abortion, period. That absolute view certainly eases the analysis, as is made evident in the dissent, which is a hammer on anvil pounding of that theme. But we cannot agree with that. As already explained, even under the full force of HB 214, any woman who does not want a child with Down syndrome may lawfully obtain an abortion solely for that reason. Because Judge Donald's dissent is predicated on the premise that HB 214 categorically bans a woman's access to abortion, this puts us in an irreconcilable disagreement on the meaning and effect of HB 214, such that, as each side sees it, we are considering HB 214 as two differently worded laws, and we cannot read HB 214 that way. So they're saying we can't have HB 214 ban women from getting abortions because they know their baby has Down syndrome, because that would be a thought crime. Both a thought crime and a thought crime. That would be a thought crime, and we don't allow thought crimes. You can have whatever reasoning you want behind your legal decision. If your decision to abort your baby is legal, then your reasoning for it can be yours. What they're not going to allow is a doctor to engage in a eugenics program. Maybe that's how this should be worded, because that's the distinction. And it's a distinction with a very big difference, not a distinction without a difference. You cannot determine that a certain set of people as a doctor is less valuable than others. You can't do it. And if you know that that's the reason, you can't support it. And you just have to tell the woman, sorry, you can't do it. And she has to go to a different clinic and try again with a different doctor. That's the ultimate result of this, by the way. Like, I don't mean to be crude about it, but if you tell your doctor, oh, hey, by the way, I want to kill my Downs baby. And they go, yeah, I'm not going to do that because the law says I can't. Then they just have to go to the next clinic and say, oh, hey, by the way, doc, I want to kill my baby. And the doc says, fine. That's the burden here. And there's at least 5 clinics in the state, obviously, because the 5 of them are plaintiffs. But that being said, here we go. In his separate dissent, Chief Judge Cole claims that HB 214 prevents this woman from exercising her right, protected by the free speech clause of the First Amendment, to tell her Down syndrome selective reason to the doctor who would perform her abortion. While we certainly understand the plaintiffs to be arguing that HB 214 burdens their ability to share their Down syndrome selective reason with the doctor who would perform the abortion, the plaintiff did not raise any First Amendment free speech claim. The plaintiffs raised only a substantive due process claim based on the right to an abortion established in Roe. And this is also a bad argument anyway. Look, if I express to you my desire to murder you, like, look, I'm going to cut off your nipples, stab you in the heart, and then bury you. That is not protected free speech if I'm intending to convey a threat to you. So if you're intending to convey an unlawful activity, that's not necessarily automatically free speech. It probably should be, but it's not under existing jurisprudence. So again, there's a lot of questions over what should be and what is. And what is not is this idea that you have an unfettered ability to communicate your desire to commit a crime. There are plenty of circumstances where your confessed desire to commit a crime is itself unlawful and not protected as free speech. So this is an unavailing argument to me, but, at least they made it. Okay. Chief Judge Cole's First Amendment free speech argument was not before the district court or the panel, nor was it argued in this en banc panel. We've not heard the state side of this argument. In fact, we've not even heard the plaintiff's views on this issue. It's not properly before us. In our view, the effect of HB 214 on this woman is to deny the doctor of her choosing when and only when that doctor of her choosing is a doctor who knows that her reason for the abortion is because she doesn't want a child with Down syndrome. By preventing the doctor from joining the woman as a knowing accomplice to her Down syndrome selective decision-making, HB 214 prevents this woman from making the doctor a knowing participant in her decision to abort her pregnancy because her fetus has Down syndrome. As limitations or prohibitions go, this is specific and narrow. Importantly, this is also paving the way to gender selective abortions. And if you're some sort of weird, feminista in the chat or whatever who's not normally here, understand that one of the other, first of all, Down syndrome are like the highest percentage aborted babies. Next is Black, and then next is girls. I don't want girls aborted because they're girls either. And I don't want Black babies aborted because they're Black or half Black either. So if you're some weird, social justice Klingon, get your fucking shit together and understand what the hell the arguments are about here. This isn't about Down syndrome babies. This is about every possible category you can think of. And the government certainly has an interest in protecting certain babies from eugenicide. And if you don't understand that argument, you're a fucking moron and a fucking sycophant, and you should probably have been eugenicsed in the womb to save us all of your fucking idiocy. So fuck you. There you go. And if you come here looking for coddling and not being offended, fuck you too. Ace of Spades says, Nick, don't say let's be real about this. You got to say, okay, legal eagles, let's think like a lawyer. Chewbacca is a Wookiee, then why is he living with Ewoks? All right, in our view, the effect of HB 214 on a woman is to... Oh, damn it. I read through that already. As limitations or prohibitions go, this is specific and narrow. The result is that the right at issue would be the woman's right to a specific doctor, one with knowledge of her specific Down syndrome selective reason for the abortion. One would be hard-pressed to find that right established anywhere. C. Rowe, denying the contention that the woman's right is absolute and that she's entitled to terminate her pregnancy at whatever time, in whatever way, and for whatever reason she alone chooses. Importantly, the Supreme Court has not articulated any rule that would suggest that the right to choose abortion encompasses the right to choose a particular abortion method. More to the point, if there's an argument to be made that there exists such a constitutional right, the plaintiffs have not made it. Regardless, the plaintiffs did not, in their complaint or their ensuing arguments, state their claim as a right to a specific doctor. The plaintiff's claim is that for this particular woman who wants or needs her abortion to be performed by a doctor who knows her Down syndrome selective reason, HB 214 would cause her to forego the abortion and instead have her baby. In deciding the truth of this claim, the question becomes whether the burden that HB 214 imposes on this woman's choosing or obtaining the abortion is undue. If the only available abortion method is so undesirable as to make the woman choose to not have no abortion at all, the undue burden framework remains the appropriate remedy for addressing that concern. Supreme Court has given us particular tests to answer this question. So again, this is defeated automatically because she could just go to any other doctor to perform the abortion, or she could have just not told her doctor her reason. Either one of those would have worked. Since Roe, which struck down an outright prohibition on abortion, most abortion cases concern laws that impede or obstruct a woman's ability to obtain an abortion. And again, even if we keep Roe, it's way too powerful. It's bad legal reasoning. That should be the most offensive part of this. It's all very bad legal reasoning. A second, slightly different class of abortion cases concerns laws that do not affect a woman's ability to obtain an abortion, but instead regulate the method of abortion, meaning they prohibit a doctor from performing one type of abortion but permit other types. This case concerns a law directed at neither a woman's ability to obtain an abortion nor the method of abortion. Instead, as just explained, it prohibits a doctor from aborting a pregnancy if the doctor knows that the woman's purpose is to preclude the birth of a child who will have Down syndrome. But it permits the same abortion if the doctor does not know. Thus, from the plaintiff's perspective, it regulates via the doctor the reason behind the woman's decision. But only for the doctor. The woman could go anywhere else and get the same abortion. Just that doctor who knows can't perform it. Not all doctors. Hashtag not all doctors. First Last says, you can fire someone because they're black as long as you don't tell anyone you're firing someone because they're black. That wouldn't fly. What's the fucking difference? Actually, it does fly. It literally does fly. The difference is you can't have a disparate treatment on blacks in the workplace, or whites, or Mexicans, or Asians, or whatever. Pick your classification. It doesn't matter. If you're firing an individual because they are black and you don't mention that, but you're at an at-will state, you absolutely can. Same with if they're white. Same with if they're Asian, man, woman, gay, doesn't matter. As long as you don't say it. You can fire someone for no reason. Now, the question is, did you fire all of the black people and only the black people? Then they can prove disparate treatment or disparate impact based on their race. You are actually allowed the thought crime of racism in hiring decisions and firing decisions. What you're not allowed to do is apply that racism generally and blanketedly to everybody. if you're only firing a particular race, well then, even if you didn't tell someone, you're going to get tagged. But the law literally is right now, if you fire someone for no articulated reason, even if that reason inside your mind is that they're black or white or Hispanic or Mexican or Hispanic and Mexican, I think are the same, Latino, Asian, I would say Indian, but they don't exist. So as long as you don't say it, and as long as it's not a blanket platform that people can go ahead and do, yeah, you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to do that. Maybe you shouldn't be, but you are. So I just wanted to clear that up. Basically, there's no thought crime in the U.S. I mean, there is thought crime, but it's pretty hard to get to. And you have to be, most people are not going to do it, right? Like most employers, first of all, are not going to hire if they hate minorities, they're just not going to hire a bunch of minorities. Second of all, if they did hire a bunch of minorities, it'd be weird to say that they hate them in the first place. But second, if they did fire only minorities and not whites or something like that, and only a particular subset of minorities at that, they would likely end up being charged. But it takes a lot to prove that. There have to be no other reasonable reasons for the terminations. Like if you fire 3 white people and no firings of any other race, you don't get to say, well, they only fire white people if 2 of them were stealing from the company, for example. I mean, then it makes sense for 2 of the firings, and the third one is incidental. So that it's not that clear. The court has created 2 unique tests that are specific to abortion cases. The first is the undue burden test, in which a law concerning abortion will survive a challenge if it furthers a legitimate or valid state interest and does not have either the purpose or effect of creating a substantial obstacle to the woman's ability to obtain an abortion. So there's a footnote here. I've skipped most of them because they're not interesting, but 6 says, it appears in this context that the court has used the words legitimate and valid interchangeably. So this is like intermediate scrutiny, which is weird. Let's see. Where are we? The other unique test for abortion cases is the large fraction test, which applies when the plaintiff makes a facial constitutional challenge to the law, such as the plaintiff made here. Under that test, the law is invalid in all cases without exception on its face if it poses an undue burden in a large fraction of relevant cases, even if it would not pose an undue burden in some small fraction of cases. The undue burden test holds that a law creates a substantial obstacle to a woman's ability to obtain an abortion. Then it poses, if a law creates a substantial obstacle, then it poses an undue burden on her protected right, is invalid, and must be struck down. So the crux of that test is whether the law creates a substantial obstacle, a question more easily asked than answered because the court has suggested differing ways of identifying a substantial obstacle. Most recently in June Medical, the court split sharply on this issue with the four-member plurality, asserting a sliding scale balancing test in which a regulation poses a substantial obstacle whenever its burden exceeds its benefit. That's useless legally, by the way. Completely useless. And the Chief Justice concurring in judgment only, asserting a binary test in which a regulation poses a substantial obstacle only when the burden is objectively substantial, regardless of any benefit. In Gonzalez, which concerned laws that regulate the method of abortion, the court used a slightly different test that emphasized the state's interest, limited the doctor's interest, and used reasonable alternatives to show the absence of a substantial obstacle. After oral argument in this appeal, a panel deciding a separate appeal published an opinion in which we explained that because no opinion in June Medical Services garnered a majority, we faced the vexing task of deciding which opinion controls. We applied Marks versus United States to determine that the June Medical concurrence was the narrowest opinion and therefore the governing law. That was EMW's holding, and this is its test. Under the Chief Justice's controlling opinion in June Medical, a law regulating abortion is valid if it satisfies 2 requirements. First, it must be reasonably related to a legitimate state interest. Because we are to apply the traditional rule of deference to the state's medical and scientific judgments, this requirement is met whenever a state has a rational basis to use its regulatory power. Second, the law must not have the effect of placing a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking an abortion of a non-viable fetus. Under the law of our circuit, a woman faces a substantial obstacle when she is deterred from procuring an abortion as surely as if the government has outlawed abortion in all cases. Even if a law regulating abortion is unconstitutional in some applications, the law remains facially valid so long as it does not impose an undue burden in a large fraction of the cases in which the regulation is relevant. Because the test articulated in EMW is the controlling law of our circuit, we apply it here. Woo! That's a lot of words there. Amateur Ant says this will never go to I want to read this super chat out of order because it's important. This will never go to the Supreme Cowards. They will stop this to try to keep 9 justices. The left are doing what the cripple from the 30s and 40s did. Very possible. The difference here is there is an existing circuit split on how to interpret this particular type of restriction. So this one may go. If it does go, you can almost expect what's called a per curiam opinion, a very limited opinion of the court, not a fully fleshed out one. And we'll see. And not a re-ruling of Roe versus Wade. That is unlikely from this case. How many more pages is this damn opinion? Oh my God. Oh, come on. Look at all this. Jeez, we got to go to page 28. I think I'm on 14. Fuck me. 15. Wagon loads, if you want to email it to me, go ahead. Before proceeding, we can briefly recap the state's view of HB 214's benefits and articulate the plaintiff's view of its burdens. Ohio asserts that HB 214 furthers 3 valid and legitimate interests by protecting 1, the Down syndrome community from the practice of Down syndrome selective abortions and the stigma associated with it. You've said this like 5 times already. Pregnant women and their families from coercion by doctors who advocate the abortion of Down syndrome afflicted fetuses, and the integrity and ethics of the medical profession by preventing doctors from becoming witting participants in Down syndrome selective abortions. The common theme of these interests is the doctor's knowing participation in the Down syndrome stigmatic decision-making. The plaintiffs assert that HB 214 burdens the right to an unencumbered abortion. In our careful view of the plaintiff's briefing, we've identified as many as 5 articulable burdens that the plaintiff argues HB 214 will impose on a woman. It will prevent her from having a full, open, and honest conversation with her doctor, who will perform her abortion by forcing her to withhold the specific reason for the abortion. It may cause, encourage, or influence her to adjust or misrepresent her reason for the abortion. It may cause her to conceal her medical history if that history contains a prenatal diagnosis or other significant indicators of fetal Down syndrome. It may necessitate that she can engage in doctor shopping to find a doctor who is unaware of her reasoning for having the abortion, and it may cause her to forego the educational, counseling, or assistance programs offered to women with a Down syndrome fetus. While the plaintiffs might not have been so explicit or precise in proffering each of these burdens, and they certainly did not enumerate these burdens in this way, neither were they vague or unclear in presenting the substance of their claims. Without delving into the substantiality or weight of these proposed burdens, we find even if the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th items on the list would be cognizable burdens standing alone, they add little to the analysis here because as a practical matter, they are necessarily included in the 1st and 4th items. The second burden on the list, i.e. that HB 214 may cause or encourage a woman to reconsider or adjust her reason for having the abortion, is one of HB 214's fundamental objectives. As the state argues in his briefing, the plaintiffs provide no sound reason to believe that women who want Down syndrome selective abortions will continue to reveal their motives, or the doctors will otherwise continue to learn these motives once it's in effect. Moreover, it is questionable whether a woman would willingly announce that motive if she recognized that doing so was hurtful and many to many in the Down syndrome community. To the extent that HB 214 might influence a woman to misrepresent her reason, that would be her personal choice. Regardless, as a political matter, any burden the woman feels from withholding this reason from the doctor who will perform her abortion is included in the first item on the list. The possibility that a woman, when speaking with the doctor who would perform her abortion, might decide to change her reason or lie about her reason on sober second thought is not a separate burden on a woman's ability to choose or obtain an abortion. That's interesting, right? Like, the argument is she might change her mind. Okay. That's kind of the point of the law. They want her to change her mind. The third and fifth burdens on the list, i.e. that HB 214 may force her to conceal her medical history or forgo Down syndrome-related counseling or assistance programs for fear this might reveal her Down syndrome selective reason to the doctor, do not arise from HB 214. The law prohibits the doctor from performing an abortion if the woman knows or reasonably believes the fetus has Down syndrome and she wants an abortion because of that Down syndrome and the doctor knows that is her reason. We must credit all three requirements. Certainly, a test result or prenatal diagnosis in her medical record would be direct evidence of the first element, in her participation in Down syndrome counseling or assistance programs would be comparable circumstantial evidence. But proving element 1 does not automatically prove elements 2 or 3. The woman's knowledge that her fetus has Down syndrome is not a per se reason for wanting the abortion, as the plaintiff himself has stressed in this case. Women seek abortions for a variety of reasons, including health, family, financial, or other personal reasons. Therefore, these do not appear to be cognizable burdens. Even in circumstances in which both the doctor and the woman know of the fetal Down syndrome diagnosis, for the doctor to have the actual knowledge necessary under HB 214, the woman must somehow reveal to that doctor her otherwise private opinion that she does not want a child with Down syndrome, and that is why she is having the abortion. Consequently, to the extent that HB 214 might cause a woman to withhold her medical history or bypass Down syndrome counseling or assistance programs for fear of revealing her reason to the doctor who would perform her abortion, these burdens are subsumed by the first item on the list. Therefore, in conducting the analysis that follows, we rely on the plaintiff's first and fourth asserted burdens. HB 214 will prevent a full, open, and honest conversation with the doctor who will perform her abortion. And HB 214 may force a woman seeking an abortion to engage in doctor shopping to find a doctor who is unaware of her reasoning for seeking the abortion. Plaintiffs argue that HB 214 imposes a categorical ban on a subset of pre-viability abortions, but as shown, it is not a ban. Even under the full force of the bill, a woman in Ohio who does not want a child with Down syndrome may lawfully obtain an abortion. HB 214 does not prohibit her from choosing or obtaining an abortion for that or any other reason. By the way, we're at 850 likes. If you want to get up to 1,000, I will take another shot of expensive alcohol, and maybe this will get really spicy. Maybe not. Don't know. We're getting late in the show, but that's up to you guys. To the extent that HB 214 amounts to a prohibition, it prohibits a doctor from aborting a pregnancy when that doctor knows the woman's particular reason, and that reason is that she knows or has reason to know the forthcoming child will have Down syndrome, and at least in part because of that, she does not want it. The district court erred by granting a preliminary injunction on the ground that HB 214 eradicated the woman's right to an abortion, which is clear that it does not. HB 214, like, you could maybe make the argument if there was only one abortion doctor in the state, or if the state had a limit that only one approved abortion doctor existed, or if the state had some requirement to disclose the reasoning under penalty of perjury or something like that. Those don't exist here. HB 214 advances the state's legitimate interests and will not prevent a large fraction of the women it affects from obtaining abortions. As mentioned, HB 214 furthers three valid and legitimate interests by protecting the Down syndrome community from the stigma, pregnant women and their families from coercion, and the integrity and ethics of the medical profession. I'm tired of reading those three sentences. These are legitimate interests. Together, these three interests focus on a doctor's knowing participation in a direct decision to abort a pregnancy because the forthcoming child would have Down syndrome, and HB 214's overall objective is to prevent that conduct. HB 214 is reasonably related to Ohio's legitimate interests. Next, we ask whether the law has the purpose or effect of placing a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking an abortion. The burdens here are that HB 214 will prevent full, open, honest conversation with the doctor who will perform the abortion by forcing the woman to withhold the reason for the abortion and to require her to engage in doctor shopping to find a doctor who is unaware of her reason for having an abortion. They have said this. They could have cut so many words from this decision by not repeating these same lists over and over again. Thus, we consider whether these burdens would likely prevent a significant number of women from obtaining an abortion. You've already said this and this. Why don't you just go into A and B? Given the laws that merely increase costs, create potential delays, necessitate judicial bypass, or require the dissemination of truthful, non-misleading information are not substantial obstacles, and neither is a law that merely prevents a doctor from acting on a statement or opinion from a patient that is, as the plaintiff's expert put it, not medically relevant. The plaintiffs have not shown, nor even genuinely argued, that this act by this woman expressing this personal and otherwise private opinion to the doctor who will perform her abortion is necessary to either her choice to have the abortion or the doctor's ability to perform it. Failing that, they have not shown that the withholding of this opinion or reason is any more burdensome than additional delay, cost, or travel. Would any woman who is otherwise set on having an abortion choose not to have that abortion and instead have the baby solely because she could not have the abortion performed by the specific doctor to whom she desires to reveal or has revealed that her reason for the abortion is that she does not want a child with Down syndrome? Taking the next step, would a significant number of such women do so? We think the answer to both questions is clearly no. And of course it's not. Of course it's no. But more importantly, the plaintiffs have certainly made no such showing. Random Blaze says that was a real quick panel on Biden and his court packing. House is already going to introduce a bill to raise the Supreme Court to 13 judges. Really? They announced that, huh? Remember that, by the way, when they want to get rid of that filibuster? That's why. That's why. You get rid of the filibuster and allow 51 votes in the Senate to pass that bill, it'll pass. What happens if the woman accidentally, defiantly, or without an understanding of the law reveals that reason to the doctor? In that case, to comply with HB 214, the doctor must disqualify him or herself from performing that abortion. The woman must then secure a different doctor who is unaware that is her reason, possibly through a referral by the first doctor. Certainly, even with a referral, this could take some time. It would likely cost some additional money, and it might force her to travel farther than she would have had to otherwise. But without something more, the court has already determined that these types of burdens do not rise to the level of an objectively substantial obstacle. Finding that delays of much more than a day and travel of long distances were not a substantial obstacle. While closing the Dayton clinic may be burdensome for some of its potential patients, the fact that these women may have to travel farther to obtain an abortion does not constitute a substantial obstacle. Ultimately, the question is whether these burdens will have the effect of precluding a woman from choosing or obtaining an abortion. The evidence demonstrates they will not. In the plaintiff's proffered evidence, Chris France, Preterm Cleveland's executive director, states via affidavit that Preterm Cleveland will have no choice but to refuse to provide abortions to women who have reason to believe their child has Down syndrome. She has not explained, however, why Preterm Cleveland would not be able to provide abortions to such women if the doctor were unaware of their specific motive. Doctors Lappin and Cade express the same view. None of the plaintiff's declarants, however, say that the doctor would be unable to perform an abortion if the doctor were unaware that the woman has this motive. Dr. Lappin's affidavit effectively admits that women affected by HB 214 could still obtain abortion simply by not disclosing this motive to that specific doctor, stating, "I am concerned that HB 214 will encourage women who have Down syndrome testing and decide to proceed with an abortion to hide the test results from the physician and staff who will provide the abortion." Yeah, they don't have any reason to include those test results. It's not going to change the abortion. These declarants claim they would advise such women to seek an abortion in another state, but none explains why the provider would not be able to refer such women to another doctor in Ohio who would be unaware of the woman's motive. There is, at this point, no basis to conclude that the plaintiffs are likely to succeed in showing HB 214 will impose an undue burden. There's no reason, there's actually no reason for them to conclude that she's having an abortion because of the Down syndrome, unless she actually tells them. So that's silly. Hiding the test results. If she hides the test results, then you have no knowledge. And there's no punishment for the woman in hiding the test results. What's the problem here? The plaintiffs argue that knowledge is defined so broadly under Ohio law that by incorporating a knowledge requirement, HB 214 imposes a duty on abortion providers to proactively investigate a woman's reasons for wanting an abortion before performing one. That is, if a doctor knows of a Down syndrome diagnosis, says the plaintiffs, Ohio law requires that the doctor inquire into the woman's reasons for having an abortion. It doesn't say that, though. Plaintiffs are right that knowledge is defined broadly, but Ohio's broad definition of knowledge does not alter the reality that the woman remains in control of who knows, who does not know the reason for her abortion. And the record simply does not support the notion that a large number of doctors would independently learn of the reason such that it would place a substantial obstacle in the path of most women seeking abortions. Ohio's knowledge requirements does not amount to an undue burden. That was a bad argument from them anyway. That was a bad argument. The plaintiff's argument regarding the lack of a health exception also fails. They argue that HB 214 is unconstitutional because it has no life or health exception for a woman whose fetus has Down syndrome and who will also need an abortion to protect her own life or health. By the way, this is what I wanted to get to. The number of cases in which an abortion is required, especially pre-viability cases, in which an abortion is required to protect the life or health of the mother, is effectively zero. It is effectively zero. Now, there are cases in which a pregnancy can affect the life or health of the mother. That is real. They're extremely rare. They're extremely rare. But that being said, they do exist. They do exist. They're way overblown, but they exist. So, shockingly, in my fun travails and trials as a dad, we've actually encountered this. Believe it or not. Believe it or not, we've actually encountered this. So one of our children was a potential, it's called a corneal implantation. And that is an implantation either very near the opening of the fallopian tube into the uterus or outside of the uterus. These do happen. They're really, really rare, and they're really, really terrifying. And these are not typically viable pregnancies. They're also not considered abortions because when you have a corneal pregnancy, you have a corneal implantation, it's not an abortion procedure that takes place. You get either a full or a partial hysterectomy. That's what has to happen. This is not an abortion. This is not a D&E. There's nothing regarding an abortion at all. It does, I guess, technically abort the pregnancy, but we're talking about a major surgical procedure to remove the portion of the uterus at minimum, if not the whole uterus, from the woman to keep her from dying. Because as the baby grows, it will rupture the uterus, cause internal bleeding, and the woman will bleed out and the fetus will not survive. This was never anything close to a viable fetus, and in fact, it's not a viable pregnancy. Now, we actually encountered this. That was a very, very hard couple of weeks for us to have this discussion because the thought was that we had a corneal implantation. The reality was that ultrasounds are not perfect. And thank goodness, upon subsequent ultrasounds, they found out that it was not actually corneal. It just kind of, the way ultrasound works, because it's a 2-dimensional image of a 3-dimensional space, it kind of looked like it was in place for that. And subsequent ultrasounds confirmed that it was not. We were very, very fortunate. So, the point is the number of abortions that actually occur for the quote unquote health of the mother is so close to zero that it would probably shock you. And in reality, if it were accurately reported, may in fact, as far as traditional abortions go, may in fact be zero. May in fact be zero. Because most of the time, threats to the mother that are something beyond like a corneal implantation, whereas the pregnancy itself becomes a risk to the mother, occur at the point of viability. They don't usually occur at pre-viability. This is stuff like preeclampsia and other conditions that occur late in a pregnancy, which can cause significant blood pressure or blood loss for the mother. Those things tend to be at the point of at least a cesarean as the potential remedy. A pre-viability abortion that risks the life of the mother it's so exceedingly rare as it's statistically insignificant. And if we eliminated all abortion but protected that, there wouldn't even be abortion clinics. Everyone would be an ER, because that's the only it would be such a rare procedure as to be effectively non-existent. And this is an oft told lie in the abortion discussion. And again, this is the importance of having a scientific and statistics-based discussion on this. This is not a medical reality in 2021. It was barely a medical reality in 1967. So, I don't know what to tell you, but this is the problem here. The abortion discussion is certainly not a trust the science discussion. It hasn't been for a very, very long time. It's entirely a trust the politics discussion. And that's okay. Again, there's nothing wrong with having a political position on this stuff. Let's just be honest about it. Let's just be honest about it. All right, that being said, this requirement applies both before and after viability, but the court has also said that facial attacks are not the proper procedure for challenging the lack of health exception. Proper means to consider exceptions is by an as-applied challenge. Okay, so as-applied versus a facial challenge is getting back to those, it's kind of getting back in a sense to the hiring stuff we talked about earlier. There's the facial challenge, which says, we will not hire black people. And then there's the as-applied challenge, which says, we'll hire anybody, but they never hire black people, even though they're valid applicants and all that stuff. It's similar, but obviously different because we're talking about the government here versus a private enterprise. A facial challenge says abortions are illegal. Okay, you can't have a facial challenge. An as-applied challenge says, this circumstances of abortions are illegal, but all other abortions are legal. And that circumstance includes enough to make it effectively that all abortions are illegal. So that's the as-applied challenge. So the prohibition that would ban a health exception would be an as-applied challenge, not a facial challenge. And that's recognizing the absolute ridiculous rarity of the circumstances. And in a life-saving situation, there is always room for a one-off. And by one-off, I mean a real one-off. Jennifer Miller. Yeah, and that's how they tend to go. That's how they tend to go. Thanks for sharing your story, by the way. When there is a life-threatening situation with a baby, it's usually very significantly progressed in the pregnancy, because the baby isn't actually burdensome enough to the mother in the early parts of the pregnancy to pose that significant risk most of the time. All right, so back to this. An as-applied challenge is a proper manner to protect the health of the woman if it can be shown that in discrete and well-defined instances her health or life is at risk. In an as-applied challenge, the nature of the medical risk can be better quantified and balanced than in a facial attack, as can the legal risks. It is neither a court's obligation nor within its traditional institutional role to resolve questions of constitutionality with respect to each potential situation that might develop. The plaintiff's facial challenge to the lack of a health exception is improper. All told, the plaintiffs have not shown, and have shown no likelihood that they could prove, that HB 214 will impose an undue burden in a large fraction of cases, which is relevant. In Planned Parenthood of Indiana and Kentucky Incorporated versus Commissioner of Indiana State Department of Health, the Seventh Circuit considered an Indiana law that would prohibit a doctor from performing an abortion when that doctor knows that the woman is aborting the pregnancy because she does not want a child that she knows from the fetal diagnosis will be of a certain gender, race, color, national origin, or ancestry, or will have Down syndrome or some other genetically inherited physical or mental disability. As with HB 214 in the present case, the Indiana law did not directly prohibit the woman from having an abortion for those reasons. It prohibited a doctor from aborting a pregnancy when the doctor knows the woman's reason, and that reason is that she doesn't want the forthcoming child because it will have one of those genetic characteristics. Read the same way that we read HB 214, the Indiana law does not prohibit the woman from deciding based on race, gender, or disability. It forbids the doctor who would perform her abortion from effectuating that reason. But the Pink opinion construed the Indiana law differently. Apparently presupposing the doctor's actual knowledge of the woman's reason, Pink declared the law invalid because it prohibits abortions prior to viability if the abortion is sought for a particular purpose, which is far greater than a substantial obstacle. It is an absolute prohibition. That is, Pink construed the law as saying that regardless of whether the woman ever revealed or the doctor actually knew her reason, the law prohibited her from obtaining an abortion because she had adopted, in the privacy of her own conscience, one of the enumerated impermissible reasons. Nothing in the 14th Amendment or Supreme Court precedent allows a state to invade this woman's personal privacy realm to examine the underlying basis for her decision to terminate her pregnancy prior to viability. Pink also said that, prior to viability, the undue burden test only applies to laws calculated to inform the woman's free choice, not hinder it. Laws that prohibit any woman from making the ultimate decision to terminate her pregnancy before viability are absolutely forbidden. The opening paragraph of this subsection, supra, explains why that Indiana law was not a prohibition, but instead was a burden subject to the undue burden test. This is consistent with the Supreme Court's recent cases that universally analyze abortion laws using the undue burden test. Certainly, the court did not construe Gonzalez's prohibition on an intact D&E as an absolutely forbidden prohibition under a theory that the state may not impose such restrictions before viability, or because that law hindered rather than informed the woman's choice. Similarly, the admitting privileges requirements in Whole Woman's Health and June Medical did not inform the woman's choice, but the courts nonetheless implied the undue burden test. Moreover, for the same reasons as presented in Section 4 of this opinion, the right to abortion, even before viability, is not absolute. Viability is not germane to the analysis of this law, and the right at issue is not even the right to obtain an abortion. For these reasons, we must respectfully disagree with Pink. That's interesting. So that's a Seventh Circuit case. So it's not in the same circuit. So they're allowed to disagree with it without overturning it or anything else. As we said in the foregoing section, the undue burden test, as articulated by the Chief Justice in his June Medical concurrence, is the controlling law of the Sixth Circuit, and nothing in this section alters or diminishes that statement in any way. However, because the June Medical plurality pressed an alternative undue burden test, because the unusual nature of HB 214 might arguably fit an alternative case, and because the large fraction test has proven difficult in practice, those few of us who joined this section thought it worthwhile to show that HB 214 would not pose an undue burden under any test that the court could conceivably apply. We recognize that this section is little more than a separate concurrence and, being dicta, creates no controlling law. But the fact that dicta is not binding does not mean that the dicta is incorrect. Going one step further, the point is that even if the Supreme Court were to overrule EMW, we would not find it necessary to reconsider the constitutionality of HB 214. Woo! We're getting there. We're getting through this decision. It's almost done. The June medical plurality stated the undue burden test in the unusual way. A law is invalid if it has the purpose or effect of presenting a substantial obstacle to a woman seeking an abortion. But when deciding the substantial obstacle test, it said that courts must consider the burdens and benefits together by weighing the asserted benefits of the law against the burdens it imposed on abortion access, and finding a substantial obstacle whenever the balance tips towards the burdens, regardless of the objective severity or substantiality of the burdens. The June medical plurality determined that the principal burden posed by the admitting privileges requirement was that it would force certain doctors and clinics out of business, leading to a drastic reduction in the number of geographic distribution of abortion providers. It also stated 4 associated lesser burdens: longer waiting times, increased crowding, increased risk of complications during the procedure due to the delays, and increased driving distances. Now, this is interesting because pretty much only in abortion is this even an issue. Like, let's go this way. I have restricted access to Popeye's fried chicken. I think that is offensive to my right to eat fried chicken. And I have, by the way, a right to eat fried chicken. The state cannot intervene on my ability to eat fried chicken, generally speaking. They would have to have some reason, some very good reason to prevent me from eating fried chicken. But they can't. Yet, I am not permitted to complain that there's not a Popeyes within 100 miles of my location. Only in abortion do you get to complain about this. In fact, if you live where there is not, quote, adequate access to hospitals, that's not an undue burden on your right to medical care. Think about that. Only, again, another fictitious right created by Roe versus Wade, that not only must abortion be not opposed by the state, it must in fact be accessible to a sufficient level. Why? That's a weird one. It then turned its attention to the law's asserted benefits and determined that the admitting privileges requirement did not further legitimate interest in protecting women's health and welfare. It offered no significant health-related benefits. Therefore, the June medical plurality concluded that because the burdens were substantial and the benefits were insignificant, the law imposed an undue burden. 667MD says, for some reason, this stream isn't showing up on my recommended videos. Oh, of course not. No, we're talking about abortion and Down syndrome. There's no way. Usually your live streams are always on recommended lists since I'm subscribed. Had to search this. Congrats on the shadow ban, buddy. Enjoy this grift. Buddy, I've been shadow banned for probably the past 8 months at least. But by the way, make sure you're actually still subscribed, because there was a recent wave of unsubscriptions, and that seems to be temporarily abated, but there was a wave of them, and so you may have been unsubscribed. So, turning back to the present case, the same 2 burdens continue to apply. HB 214 prevents a woman from having a full and open conversation with her doctor so that she can have her abortion performed by a doctor who knows that she does not want a child with Down syndrome and is having the abortion for that reason. And should she reveal this information to the preferred doctor anyway, it would force her to secure a different doctor who is unaware that is her reason. As already shown, these are not substantial burdens. Even so, the question is whether these burdens would nonetheless outweigh the law's asserted benefits. They would not. HB 214 furthers 3 legitimate state interests. The first is the protection of Down syndrome community. The second is the state produced evidence that in the United States, 2/3 of the pregnancies with fetal diagnosis of Down syndrome are aborted. Percentages are much higher in some other countries, making it one of the traits most commonly targeted for abortion. The state explains that when unborn children exhibiting a certain trait are targeted for abortion, it sends a message to people living with that trait they are not as valuable as others. Even though HB 214 does not prohibit Down syndrome selective abortions, It might not actually reduce the incidence of such abortions by prohibiting doctors from knowingly participating in this practice. It sends a resounding message condemning the practice of selective abortions. The state's second interest is in protecting the pregnant women and their families from coercion by doctors who advocate abortion of Down syndrome aborted fetuses, afflicted fetuses, not aborted, because some in the medical community believe that Down syndrome can and should be eradicated through a systemic abortion program. A woman with a fetal diagnosis of Down syndrome might face pressure from the doctor to abort that pregnancy. Based on the limited record here, if we accept that there are some doctors willing to exert such pressure, then HB 214 certainly furthers this interest. And there definitely are. The third interest is in protecting the integrity and ethics of the medical profession by preventing doctors from becoming knowing participants in Down syndrome selective abortions. By involving the doctor in her personal decision to abort her pregnancy because the forthcoming child would be born with Down syndrome, the one places the doctor in a position of conflicted medical, legal, and ethical duties. Ordinarily, under basic medical ethics, doctors are expected to respond to a diagnosis of Down syndrome with care and healing. In this situation, however, those doctors who would do so are instead being asked to act directly against the physical life of the fetus based solely on the fact that it would have Down syndrome. HB 214 furthers each of these legitimate interests, thereby producing the benefits the state intended. Given the minor burdens imposed by HB 214, any of those benefits alone would be enough to tip the balance away from a substantial obstacle and towards an incidental and acceptable burden. Under the June medical pluralities, balancing the three together are more than enough to overcome the burdens. Woo, couple more pages. In Gonzales, the court considered a challenge to the federal law. Oh, you guys did it. I didn't know if you would today. You passed 1,000 likes. I genuinely thought with this stream content, I thought even before we started the stream, I thought that there would not be very many people watching and that the likes would be extremely low. This is a very controversial subject, but this whiskey's old enough to vote, man. In Gonzales, the court considered a challenge to a federal law that banned one method of partial birth abortion, intact D&E, while permitting alternative methods, standard D&E or pre-abortion fetal demise. The court applied the undue burden test, asserting that the law would be invalid if its purpose or effect were to place a substantial obstacle in the path of a woman seeking an abortion. The state asserted two interests: protecting the dignity of human life and protecting the integrity and ethics of the medical profession. The court held that both were legitimate interests and that the law furthered those interests. The plaintiff doctors and clinics asserted two burdens imposed by the unavailability of intact D&E. It would subject women to significant health risks and, to a lesser extent, would be inconvenient for the doctors. The court, by the way, call me cynical, but I think it's to a greater extent it would be inconvenient for the doctors. The court acknowledged that the law would indeed be invalid if it subjected women to significant health risks, but finding the claims about the health risks scientifically disputed, oh, fucking surprise there, the court held that such medical uncertainty was insufficient to invalidate the law. Going one step further, the court upheld the law's ban on intact D&E because acceptable alternatives were readily available, emphasizing that the law allows, among other means, a commonly used and generally accepted method, i.e. standard D&E, so it does not construct a substantial obstacle to the abortion right. Physicians are not entitled to ignore regulations that direct them to use reasonable alternative procedures. The law need not give abortion doctors unfettered choice in the course of their medical practice, nor should it elevate their status above other physicians in the medical community. In closing, the court rejected the idea that mere convenience would suffice to displace other standard and available options. In sum, this part of the test concerned the alternatives to the restrictions. Here, considered from the plaintiff's perspective, HB 214 prevents a woman from informing the doctor who will perform her abortion that she does not want a child with Down syndrome and is having the abortion for that reason. To be sure, HB 214 does not do so expressly. By its plain terms, it merely prohibits the doctor from knowingly acting to further that reasoning, but the plaintiffs claim The effect is to deter the woman from sharing her beliefs and motive with the doctor. Plaintiffs assert that her compliance with HB 214 will impose two burdens on such a woman. It will prevent her from having a full, open, and honest conversation with the doctor who will perform her abortion, and it may force her to engage in doctor shopping to find a doctor who is unaware of her reason for seeking the abortion. We have been on this same fucking 2-point subject for the past 5 pages. You're finally getting to it? Under the first burden, the woman cannot have a full, open, and honest conversation with the abortion doctor about the reason for the abortion. That is, she cannot have both A and B together. Under the analysis of Gonzalez, we would consider reasonable alternatives. An alternative here gives that woman A and B separately. That is, she can have a full, open, and honest conversation with the doctor who will perform her abortion about anything else, including every other aspect of the procedure or even any other non-Down syndrome-based reason for having her abortion. And she can have a full, open, and honest conversation about her Down syndrome-based opinions and reason for the abortion with any other person, including her family practitioner, obstetrician, gynecologist, maternal fetal medicine specialist, genetic counselor, therapist, social worker, minister, friend, neighbor, and family members. This is a reasonable alternative that necessarily defeats any possibility of a substantial obstacle. And the key here is that the Down syndrome abortion has no medical relevance to the abortion itself. It's literally supplanting the doctor as a therapist. That's the whole purpose of allowing her to tell her doctor, hey, I want to abort my baby because it's Downsy. She can tell anybody else on earth about it, just not her doctor. And her doctor has no need to know that information. Doctor doesn't need to know why she's choosing personally to abort a baby. Doctor just needs to know that she wants to, and then the medical realities around it. How far along are you? Is there some inherent risk to the abortion? The fact that the baby has Downs has nothing to do with any of that. The other asserted burden would arise if she had to go doctor shopping for a doctor who is unaware of her reason for the abortion. Obviously, this is a little convoluted because if the first doctor never learned of her Down syndrome-based reason, they could proceed with the abortion regardless of her reason. This burden would only arise if the doctor learned of her Down syndrome-based reason, forcing that doctor to refuse to perform the abortion in order to comply with the law. The woman would then need to secure another doctor to perform the abortion, one who does not know her opinions and reason. While proceeding to a second doctor might cause a delay or incur some travel, the court has established that those are not necessarily substantial obstacles. We can infer that under this approach, the alternatives are presumptively reasonable. In Gonzalez, the prohibition on intact DNA was permissible because a woman could still obtain an abortion through an acceptable alternative method. Here, the prohibition on doctors acting with certain knowledge, i.e. knows that the woman is having an abortion because she does not want a child with Down syndrome, is permissible because the woman can obtain an abortion through an acceptable alternative approach. If we were to track the Gonzalez analysis here, HB 214 would survive on a reasonable alternatives basis. Finally, a word about the large fraction test, which the court uses for facial challenges to abortion laws. Large fraction test holds that if a law imposes an undue burden in a large fraction of cases in which it is relevant, meaning for a large fraction of those women for whom the law is an actual rather than an irrelevant restriction, then the law is invalid and must be struck down, even if it would not pose an undue burden in some cases. The obvious enigma is that the women under consideration in this case might fall into a small fraction of cases for which HB 214 poses no undue burden, but HB 214 could still be invalid on its face and struck down entirely if it were to pose an undue burden on a large fraction of all the relevant women in Ohio. The court, however, has not been clear about how to define the numerator and denominator for the fraction, about what qualifies as a fraction that is large, or about whether it is a percentage or a fractional number, possibly larger than 1. Holy shit. Oh, we're almost done. Let's see. Certainly, no courts have claimed that it is easy to apply, and the Supreme Court has been forthcoming about its own difficulties in applying it. Although our precedent includes mathematical applications, holding that 12.5% is not a large fraction, our commonplace approach has been to treat the large fraction test as a more conceptual rather than mathematical. That is consistent with the Supreme Court's first application of the test upon its creation in Casey, where the court did not conduct a mathematical determination of the fraction, but relied on expert testimony, empirical studies, and common sense. Under this common sense and conceptual approach, we can conservatively accept that HB 214 is relevant to any woman who knows that her fetus likely has Down syndrome, wants to abort her pregnancy because she does not want the child with Down syndrome, and wants the abortion performed by a doctor who knows that is her reason for having an abortion. As demonstrated, causing any such woman to forego this one specific doctor is not a substantial obstacle on her right to choose or obtain an abortion. Correspondingly, requiring a doctor who has learned that the reason to disqualify him or herself from performing the abortion on that woman and thereby necessitate that she secure a different doctor is not a substantial obstacle on the woman's ability to choose or obtain an abortion. Therefore, HB 214 does not create a substantial obstacle to a woman's ability to choose or obtain an abortion in any case, much less in a large fraction of relevant cases. We hold that the restrictions imposed or burdens created by HB 214 do not create a substantial obstacle to a woman's ability to choose or obtain an abortion. Moreover, those restrictions are reasonably related to and further Ohio's legitimate interests. Therefore, HB 214 is valid in all conceivable cases, and the plaintiff cannot succeed on the merits of their claim. They reverse and order the district court granting the preliminary injunction that was requested by the plaintiffs. Woo! I thought that was going to be like 10 to 15 pages since there's so many opinions. The average length of the opinion should be 11 pages. So I thought it would be 10 to 15. Turns out it was 30. Wagon Load says, I was born with cerebral palsy, so I feel that abortion is no different than eugenics, which Hitler used to eliminate an entire group of people based on race. Yeah, Wagon Loads. I mean, that's the interesting question. A lot of people would suggest that someone with cerebral palsy does not have sufficient quality of life to be considered a person. But would you rather be alive or dead? And I've seen a lot of chats about people with Down syndrome not being full people, not being husks of people or whatever. And you can certainly have that opinion, but I think that the person would disagree. And I think that if we had some law where Down syndrome people were considered less than people and you could walk up and shoot them in the head, they might protest that. But I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe not. Maybe they would all think that they deserve to die. Poop Natch, that wasn't a joke. That was reality. And that's the hard part. Like, look, there are lots of things that I would consider as not worthy of being human. For example, like if I was, I can't even say the joke because people will say it serious. Like if I was Irish, like that's a joke. That's clearly a joke. But there have been all kinds of times in human history where one people group has decided that another people group is not worthy of humanity. I thought we were past that. An anime voice actor, or if I was fat, for example. Like, if I was fat, I guess you could just kill me then. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Pick any characteristic about someone. Many people would say Republicans don't deserve to live, or conservatives, or libertarians, and libertarians might not, and Democrats, communists. And while we can have those discussions, especially about communists, legally speaking, those aren't permissible determinations of who gets to live. And so it's important to remember that it's not our subjective determination upon a person's value. It's literally that they're a person. That's it. All persons, no matter their specific traits or characteristics, are imbued with life, liberty, imbued by their creator. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Really the pursuit of property. That's what the founders built our country on. If we want to change it, if we want to change that, then we have to change it. But until then, that's the law. So I'm not a proponent of selective abortions. I'm not a proponent of any abortions, but I'm specifically not a proponent of selective abortions. If you are, that's cool. Like I get it. I'm not going to shame you. We just disagree. It's okay. And I'll listen to reasoned arguments, on the subject. I don't think you're going to convince me, but I'll listen. I'll challenge my own thinking. And I would encourage everyone to do the same. Pretty interesting case. There's a very real possibility this goes to the Supreme Court because there's a circuit split on it now. And that circuit split has already been appealed to the Supreme Court. And with 5-4 justices right now, may be interesting to see what happens with that. KCD, what's wrong? You're trying to make a comment and it won't post them? I have YouTube's algorithmic restrictions on comments at the absolute minimum. So I can't make it more permissive than it is. So I'm sorry if they are censoring your chats. It's not me, and I can't make it better. All right. Let's do, oh my God, it's already 2. Let's do these justice chats and super chats, and then we will wrap up the show. Let me see something here. Okay. All right. Let's do this. That Catnip Dave says, I survived my childhood and not lived it because there were lots of people who thought I didn't deserve to live. That hurts me. Like I don't understand the idea of deciding based on a characteristic that someone doesn't deserve to live. Like I can decide based on opinions and actions all day. Like look, suffer not the pedo to live. To me, I don't fucking care. But that being said, like that's not an immutable characteristic. That's an action. That's a choice. And don't even come at me with the whole, people are attracted to what they're attracted to. Yeah. Sorry. Fuck off. You have some say. You have some say over what you're attracted to. You really do. You really have some say. And we need to stop pretending otherwise. All right. Nick says, I was there when Razor was banned from Twitch. Someone mentioned the Byron case, and he completely lost his shit, dropped gamer words and worse. Then he went through his Discord, banning those who were civilly discussing what happened, plus the case, me included. Really? The Byron case in Minnesota? That's the genesis of the Razor banning? That's too bad. I don't know why Razor is so stuck on that case. It's a bad case. There's a bad set of facts. Look, even if the underlying principle is okay behind a case, like, yeah, I believe you should have pretty much unfettered right to defend your property. That's a bad case for just defending your property. But I don't know if that's true. That's what someone says. But either way, I mean, Razor and I, by the way, I still like Razor Fist. We might disagree a little bit on that case, but who fucking cares? And I don't think he should be banned. But that being said, I mean, that's what someone says. Who knows? Mario Carter 13 says the left never truly forgave Hitler for giving eugenics a bad name. Night of Hope says you left-wing shitfucks out there are going to have to decide whether or not the unborn are actually human. If they aren't, why can't you get rid of them for having attributes you think will be unhealthy? If they are, why can you kill them at all? Choose. Night of Hope says abortion is inherently a eugenics program. Not only are the mothers mostly in the inner city and at the lowest end of the socioeconomic spectrum, but allowing anyone to be killed in the womb is inherently to decide that their traits are less worthy of life. Also says, you guys on the left are the Nazis you're on about. You nationalize healthcare, stage false coup about abort the undesirables, disarm and silence your opposition, treat people you hate like a disease, and all in the name of a perfect government-run utopia. Fuck you. And finally, he says, if you think humans are going to lay down and die and submit to nightmare's socialist future, you may be right, But if you think you'll be spared the torture or the gulag you're trying to bring to us, you're absolutely wrong. Careful what you wish for. Bad Dragonite says, hey, Nick, did you happen to see the tweet I tagged you in today with Hikikomori Media and Hoaglaw about the Sony stuff? Seems like it could be a good show. I did not. Sorry, I was barely on Twitter today. Mario Kart 13 says, most atheists don't reason themselves into the position. If you don't knowingly believe in God, you'll unknowingly believe in a godlike figure. The science has all the perks of an all-knowing higher power with the smugness of a Rick and Morty fan. Knight of Hope says, sounds like a political assassination. Do we know how the cop votes? We're all next. Just remember this, everybody. Bad Dragonite says, I have bad news. My local liquor store owner says he not only doesn't have Lagavulin, but has never even heard of it. So I'm just sitting here with Jack Daniel's Tennessee Honey instead. Bleh. That is horrifying. What is wrong with him? Knight of Hope says, an industry that holds a view that some lives are worth more than others is not likely to retain the public's trust, unless those some lives happen to be the unborn generally. In that case, the public will trust them all the way to their baby's morgue. This seems like a sore topic for Knight of Hope. Regarding the science about if non-viable fetus is a person or not, if you stomp on every female snow leopard's stomachs and abort their pregnancies before viability 100% of the time, would they go extinct? Okay, then what is the snow leopard's life cycle? The first cell of a snow leopard is as much of a snow leopard as its body on the last day of its life. We're going to trust the real science. Then we have to start accepting what the mammalian life cycle is. Everything else is pretense of knowledge. Kirby says, these scenes in Dragon Ball answers the issue. Look at the 5th Saiyan needed for the ritual. She'd only just revealed her pregnancy. Yes, that's from the Super Saiyan God moment in the Beerus saga. Nice. Very, very nice. Bad Dragonite says, now I have to make a me brawler in Smash Bros. Dressed as a cop with that head smash drop attack. Knight of Hope says, I love you, Nick. I'm with you, buddy. Aborted Dragonite says, Down syndrome abortion sounds like a kick-ass metal band. That's true. It really does. It really does. Knight of Hope says, my mom was adopted and she's very happy to be here. Much happier than I am by a lot. I admire her will to live because I don't have the eagerness to deal with the life that she does. I hope if someone out there is considering the adoption system, they do it. And it's important to remember that the adoption system in America is an absolute mess because of the abortion system. We actually had a very robust adoption system. Certainly it was subject to various problems of its era, but it was completely destroyed and kept away from very good reforms that happened all over the rest of the country because the abortion industry obviated the adoption system. And it's really interesting because lots of people want to have adoptions and they can't afford them because private adoptions are extremely expensive. And state adoptions through the foster care system are a huge disaster. So pretty interesting discussion. Again, maybe it should be this way. Maybe it shouldn't be, but it's gone. Cormoran says, good to see Ohio giving mad respect to all my homies with extra chromies. Planned Eugenics just want to keep a downy down. Leon W says, Dems pushing legislation to add 4 more seats to SCOTUS. Thoughts? Will the Second Amendment survive? Not a fucking chance. If they get 4 more seats on SCOTUS, we're done. Hopefully Florida becomes a sanctuary state for Second Amendment. St. Pete here. Leon, you're in St. Pete? I was just in St. Pete. I go to St. Pete like 2 to 3 times a year. Why didn't you call me? What the hell? What's wrong with you? Mulfiard says, I'm going to remember that Italian remark, you little F. Facu Niga says, the duck test is real. No duckstis, no fleas. Prosecute the white geese. The duck test is actually real. Look it up. Tells witches every time. Big Bat DN says, they are trying to stop my seed from spreading throughout the U.S. Gummy says, what is the racial component to Italian abortions? Very important one. Aurelianus Says, my nephew is special needs. It hurts me to imagine preventing his existence is both legal and advocated for. It's hard on my sister and her husband, but there is love there, and it's great to see. Of course there's love there. Of course there is. I actually find like parents of special needs children that I've met, and maybe they're a minority, tend to have a significant level of grace and patience that we could all kind of emulate. And they also, I think, really do have a level of love that is admirable. Because when you think about dealing with a special needs child, it's hard to picture your life in that way. It's hard to picture doing these things and providing that extra level of care. Hell, it's hard to picture caring for another non-special needs child, just a regular needs child. No matter how many you have, it's always hard to picture another one. But there's something to it. It's almost like we have a capacity beyond our understanding. Zypher Warrior says, I saw you. You saw me down in Florida. Did you really? Why didn't you say hi? I don't believe you. I think you're lying. Joshua Worley says, Rep. Diana DeGette has just reintroduced a bill to ban high-capacity gun magazines, and Dems plan to add 4 seats to the Supreme Court. Looks like I have topics for tomorrow. Kyra says, Hail Lobster. Is that me? Are you calling me a lobster? Why am I a lobster? Paul Durfee says, are you going to talk about Biden's court packing legislation? I talked about Biden's court packing commission just yesterday. I didn't think it would already go to today. Nick says Razor's gamer words during his Byron meltdown rant is what got him the ban hammer. What is gamer word? Cyber Warrior says you were too busy hitting on a chick at the bar. Oh, really? You were not at that bar. And I was not hitting on her, by the way. She was hitting on me in good logic. And it was really embarrassing because all we wanted was to have a conversation. You were not there. I know you weren't. Ash B, I don't think I've read your super chat yet. I'm getting there. Wig Dipper says, my name is Nick Ricada, and I renounce my heathen practice of making sandwiches made with peanut butter jelly and butter. Cleanse me with your scorn. Look, don't knock it till you try it, motherfucker. Alex G, unfortunately, I'm not going to Atlanta. I'm going to a tiny little city called Kingsland, Georgia. But next time I'm in Atlanta, I will go to the Whiskey Project. Oh, he said bundle of sticks? Yeah, you can't say bundle of sticks on Twitch. Razor, man, what are you doing? You can't do that. You can't do that. But Razor's got a big announcement coming up about streaming. I already pretty much know what it is, and it's pretty cool. So check him out. He's going to be streaming on a new platform from what I understand, and it's an interesting one. So, you know, I like Razor. If you like Razor, make sure you support him wherever he ends up. Biden the Coleman says, my mom was super lucky to have 3 children. She had lupus, which often attacks a fetus. Matthew Harder says, Nick, the water gun was from the 80s. Entertech. Cool. I know it was from the 80s because that's when I had it. And by the 90s, it was gone. The gray one says, evening, Nick. This one is a test to see if PayPal fixed their crap. Also, that video was bad all around. What the fuck they doing crossing the line of fire like that? Crossing the line of fire. What video are you talking about, the gray one? Caleb Hughes says, why don't you cover the Chauvin trial? I haven't had time. I haven't had time at all to cover it. It's been, I really am pissed off because I'm just not, we got back from Florida. First of all, it started while I was in Florida, and I was down with my family. I just could not spend entire days covering the Chauvin trial. Second, when I got back from Florida, I have been nonstop fucking running. I've barely gotten any videos out. I've not had 8 hours a day to watch it, and it sucks. I really want to talk about it more. It was a huge, let's be honest here. Me covering the Chauvin trial for 8 hours a day is or me not covering the Chauvin trial for 8 hours of day is throwing away literally thousands of dollars. It's thousands of dollars of revenue for me if I would have been able to cover the Chauvin trial, and I just wasn't. So believe me, it really sucks that I haven't been able to cover it. It's not because I don't want to. It's not because I'm avoiding something. I would much rather have been earning thousands of dollars covering the Chauvin trial than driving around my local fucking city. But that's what I ended up doing and dealing with other bullshit that I don't want to deal with it anymore. But life, man, I'm stuck with it. Mario Carter 13 says, no obstacles is how she got here. No condoms. Joshua Sanabria says, I think it is morally repugnant to celebrate the accomplishments of those with congenital defects while also saying they should have been eliminated in utero. Othamer says, Down syndrome or Down syndrome. The only wrong one is Down syndrome. Good job, Ricada. So I did the only wrong one. Good job. Ryan says, from what I've researched, it's 22 weeks when cognitive function forms in a fetus's brain. But whenever it is, that's when an abortion becomes murder. But it's not. It's not actually there, according to the law. Just so we know. Just so we're clear on that. The law does not look at it that way. Sneed says, we're so smart that we can declare unborn fetuses don't deserve to live for whatever reason. Chief Beef says, God bless you, Nick. Your streams are a warm campfire on a cold night. Just wanted to let you to know. Oh, no, that's a Smokey Bear thing. Am I causing the forest fires? Jackson Kai says, my issue with abortion is I want to go to heaven. I hate awkward family reunions. World War Wit says abortion is attainder. Ooh, that's interesting. Malware Production says, hey, Nick, just wanted to tell everyone to check out the meme coin, $Hoj.finance. It'll be listed on the huge trading service. Big one starting Friday. Immature Ant says, Nick, can you play that clip of the bus driver you said going to jail now for that female cop? No, not tonight. Because it's already late. Emery Kalam says, Chewbacca is living on Endor with Ewoks. Because he is a coward leaving Mala to deal with the pain of Ichibaka's encroaching dementia. Evil XY says, here's a bit of those thousands you would have gained. Keep being a badass. I mourn uncivil for you. Ash B says, hey, Nick. So I was at the gas station today, and at the register, they were selling masks that said vaccinated, and I got the shot. Irony, thy name is Clown World. That's how it goes, man. If you get vaccinated, you need to still wear your masks according to the CDC and the WHO, and you should definitely listen to the experts and never do anything contrary to what they say. Wick Dipper says, perhaps the Ohio law is single protecting the doctors somehow. Rob Price says, that's racist, Nick. It's Latin X. Amateur Ant says, this will never go to the Supreme Cowards. They will stop this and try to keep 9 justices. The left are doing what the cripple from the 30s and 40s did. And that's exactly what FDR did. He threatened to pack the court, and then the court did his bidding from then on out. Space Force Commander says, common sense abortion control protects the right of Down syndrome individuals. Fight fire with fire. Amateur Ant says, Whammon love shopping. Why not for the right baby too? Just another car, Gucci bag, man, or shoes, SMDH. C Goody 564 says, I love these heavy episodes. This, the erosion of the Fourth Amendment, the To Catch a Predator series. Wish you did more of them like this. Catch a Predator series, man, those, to be candid with you guys, those take a really, really heavy toll on me. Those are hard to do. Those are really, really hard to do. That's why I don't do very many of them. But there's probably one coming up in the future. But man, those are fucking hard. Amateur Ant says, the best idea is for men to stop playing the losing game with laws that support women 95% of the time. Prawns free, or at least go to a third world country. LCPL Chavez says, abortion is nothing more than the devil brainwashing women and idiots into subtly believing in eugenics. CJ says, maybe this is just a 4-day chess move by the APA and big pharma lobbies so they can get those sweet therapy and psych drug bucks. That's why Roe exists. Amateur Ant says, if only more females had syndrome of a Down, my whippersnapper wouldn't look like Swiss cheese from lazy mouth teeth biters. Do better, women. Jackson Kai says, having dealt with miscarriage and having a niece die from SIDS, they seem to smile ear to ear, and every minute is better than none. Fuck. I legitimately I don't know how I would deal with a child dying. I hope I never find out, right? Like, that's the goal of every parent. But I can tell you personally, for me, that I would rather any of them have lived even a minute. In my first child, I thought, because the doctors wouldn't talk to me, I legitimately thought my first child was going to die immediately after delivery. Cord was double wrapped around his neck. He was not breathing. They immediately took him away. It was the most terrifying couple minutes of my entire life. But the cry, he came out and cried. And that feeling, that moment, even if that was the only moment, was worth it. And it was horrifying. I spent about 5 hours not knowing if my baby or my wife were going to live. Because Lady Rackets had an abnormal amount of bleeding, and my baby was taken from me without explanation. They said, "Hey, Dad, are you ready to cut the cord?" And then they told my mom, who was in the delivery room, they said, "Turn off the camera." And they didn't let me cut the cord. And they took the baby out of the room. And my wife, who's bleeding and needed immediate medical care from the OB, the delivering OB, had to stay there. She couldn't move. And she says, go to the baby. And so I have to leave the room while my wife is bleeding, an amount that required emergency medical attention, and go to a door where I am stopped and not allowed to get through the door, knowing that they told my mom to turn off a camera and stop recording just in case. And it was, and then they didn't tell us anything for hours from that. Now, what happened, I'll tell you what happened, was the baby had the cord wrapped around the neck twice. And as the baby started to come out, that cord tightened and tightened and tightened and basically did a blood choke on the baby. Now, the doctors snipped the cord right away, but then they had to force air into the baby's lungs. When a big, you know, those bottles that they squeeze with the mask on them, they put those over your face for an adult. They do the same thing for a baby, but a baby's lungs are like this big. So when they squeeze that much air in, sometimes that air punctures holes in the lungs of the baby. It's a very, very common thing called pneumothorax. They don't tell you this. So when the baby wasn't breathing, basically because it had a blood choke and just needed a little bit to get him going, and they did that breath pump into the lungs, it overinflated the lungs, popped a couple holes into the baby's lungs. Holes that would heal normally just fine. They'll heal up, baby's okay, but in the meanwhile, the holes create little oxygen pockets that sit between the ribs and the lungs, and it makes the lungs harder to inflate, and they're very weak little lungs, right? They haven't been working. Baby's been breathing through the umbilical cord. They've been breathing through a blood transfusion, or basically a blood transfer from the mom at this point. So these little struggling lungs are trying to inflate against a little air pocket, and they can't until those air pockets dissipate. So they don't tell you that this happens with relative frequency when they do a forced air resuscitation of a baby who has a low APGAR. That baby had no medical issues at all. He had to sit under an oxygen hood for about 3-4 days. And once they told me that, it was fine. But for those couple hours, I didn't know if the baby was going to live. And it was still worth that moment. Because that moment, hearing my first baby cry when he came out of the womb was, if it's not the most powerful moment in my entire life, it's top 3 easily. I can't even think of what would compare. So it's, look, if you want to know all about the horrors of the birthing process, we've had 5 children, all of which have had their own unique complications and challenges. I can make you never want to have children really fucking fast. I can do that too. Sheila Alien says C-sections, babies out in 15 minutes, everybody is okay. Not always. Trust me. I've got a story on that one too. It's a mess. It's a mess, man. It's a tough thing, and I wouldn't trade a moment of any of it. I wouldn't trade a moment of any of it for the alternative. So, just so you know, and I think that perspective is really important. I'm not going to be the weird guy that says, "Oh, if you don't have a baby, you can't have an opinion about it." You absolutely can, but I will say that people who have had children, I think their opinions that they may have held change pretty frequently. And there's a lot of emotion and experience that goes on in anyone who's had to go through this process. So that being said, I can't imagine what SIDS is like. That is literally my worst nightmare. And I'm so glad that my youngest baby is beyond the SIDS age. So glad. Matthew Harder says, "Hey, Nick, I think I moved from pro-life to pro-fence. Watch Jersh's stream about the Hartley hooligans, and I'm blackballed. Their QOL seems bad." I don't know who the Hartley hooligans are, but, that's fine. That's up to you. CJ says, "Devil's advocate. Use an atheistic argument that 2 people are the creators, thus they have the right. Then again, only one creator gets that right." I don't actually, I don't agree that the creator is the necessary infusion of rights. It's just what our founders chose as the language. But you can just say our rights are inherent from birth because we're people. You don't need a creator. Creator isn't necessary. The creator is the vehicle that the founders chose to instill rights upon people. But it's not a required element. No one says rights have to come from a creator. Rights just have to come from somewhere. And that can be your inherent status as a human. So there's a plenty of atheistic, and by the way, lots of atheists are very strong arguments of inherent rights. Very, very strong proponents of inherent rights. Being an atheist doesn't mean you oppose inherent rights. It just means you oppose the reasoning behind God-given rights. They're just not God-given for the atheists. Rhinosaurus Rex says, "In the words of Tom McDonald, so bacteria is life on Mars, but a fetus isn't life on Earth." Weird. And Gordo Fabulous says, "Had a now ex-girlfriend abort a baby on me. Named him Michael anyway." Fuck. I'm so glad I never ran into that, man. That's heavy as hell. Mario Carter 13 says, "When you lure burglars into your basement and shoot them while they beg for their lives, it doesn't look great to a jury. Does he have to skin them into a table lampshade for Razor to understand how bad that looked?" Razor's arguing for the principle that in your home you should have absolute discretion, and it's not even an extreme position. It's just a position people should have. And Razor's taking a hard line on it, saying even though it looks bad, they shouldn't have ever come into his home, and he has no obligation to them. Now, a lot of our legal system says the opposite, and in most cases I disagree, but it is the legal reality we live in. So should you have the ability to shoot anybody in your home? I mean, that we can reduce any argument to absurdity. I don't think Razor's position is untenable or bad. I'm just going to say that I can fully understand why the jury convicts him. And in the same way, I was talking about this with Drexel on his show, which will come out, I think, Friday, today, with Derek Chauvin. And I was talking with Nate, the lawyer, as well. I think that the state has made a full case for Derek Chauvin to be convicted by a jury. And I think that his attorney, Eric Nelson, has raised sufficient doubt for a jury to say not guilty as well. It's not clear cut. These are not matters of law. These are matters of juries. And those are really hard questions. Same thing with the Byron case. The Byron case, I see the case for absolute case of self-defense in the home. I also see exactly why a jury convicted him. And with Chauvin, if he gets off, I'm not surprised. And if he gets convicted, I'm not surprised either. I think the state's done a very good job in making the case against Chauvin. I think Eric Nelson's done a very good job in making the case for Chauvin. Now it's up to a jury. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's the system that we have, for better and for worse. Diamond Duck's right. Riot either way. Yep. That's going to happen. Riot either way. Angry Baneling says, here you go, Nikki. Have some more shekels. Have 100% of my shekels and not just 70% as would have the case on a certain shitty platform run by one Susan. Also, 10 out of 10 hair today. Good job washing it. It's not just washing it, It's a lot of times I wash my hair and just put some sort of product in it to do something specific. Today, I just washed it in the middle of the day, as opposed to in the morning or at night, and didn't put any product in it and let it fall naturally, based on just combing it immediately after washing it. If I washed my hair, combed it, and laid down immediately and went to sleep, it would look like ridiculous nonsense, and I'd have to put product in it. So, do you not have hair in India? I don't know how that works. Bad Dragonite says, yeah, nice cover story. We know the true number one moment that affected you was Optimus Prime's death. Don't lie. We all know you cried. If you didn't cry when Optimus Prime died, then I don't even know what you are. I don't even know what you are. Wick Dipper says, it often seems we would get a more just system if we decided legal cases with a coin flip. Yeah. That's how juries work, man. Amateur Ant says, they don't make women like they used to. My grandma had 10 kids. She was Irish. My grandpa was Mexican. Lol. There you go. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. I guess we'll go over to Twitch and watch something. God, I'm so fucking tired. Tomorrow, midday. I don't even know what time it is. Probably afternoon, evening. We will have a Twitch stream, or not a Twitch stream, a stream with Az, heel versus babyface. It will be fun. There will not be a stream tomorrow night at 11. I'm not sure about Friday night because I will be in Georgia. It will depend. If you follow me on Locals and subscribe on Locals, because at the end of the day, I am a grifter. If you subscribe on Locals, I will be posting, content related to my interactions with Vic and the tour of the Star Trek Continues set that I will be on. So if you want to have access to that, I will be posting exclusive content on Locals over the weekend. If you don't want to immediately subscribe to the Locals because you're like, I don't know what content's going to be there, just wait and see what content I post. You'll get titles. You'll get some level of preview on it. And if you want to follow, and if you want to pay to follow, I should say, you absolutely can. Also, if you're still on Patreon and watching this, move to Locals. I posted a free thing. Move off of Patreon. They hate you. They hate me. Move to Locals. All right, guys. C Goody 564. Yes, I recorded MGTOWN today with Drex. Trump Willis is my name. Says, how can you say that the stare State did a good job when they literally had to change cause of death mid-case and are now arguing how he died in multiple ways because they had medical experts credibly testify to the cause of death. That's a good job. Even in light of changing the cause of death, they had credible medical experts offer credible testimony. And if you think the jury didn't see that, I would humbly suggest that you check your own biases on that, because the jury certainly saw a good presentation by the state. I don't know that the jury will agree with the state, but they certainly saw a good presentation by it. And it's very, very important to know that, because if any source is telling you that this is a slam dunk case for Chauvin or against Chauvin, they're lying to you. They're absolutely lying to you. SMU Pony says, as a juror, that would be a massive red flag to me, but you're not a juror. That's the important thing. It's the hardest thing to remember with juries. You go to a gas station and talk to anybody in it. Talk to the clerk, talk to a guy getting gas, talk to everybody in a gas station. I actually don't recommend this, but if you do that, any one of those people could be the jury. Go to a school. Go to a bar, go to a club, go to a store, talk to a Target employee, talk to an engineer. Everybody you talk to, any one of those people could be a juror. You are not the juror. That's the hardest thing to remember when you're talking about a jury, is overwhelming majority of people are not you. Not even fucking close. And I mean that both specifically and generally. George Carlin said this correctly, right? Imagine the dumbest person that you know. Half of Americans are dumber than that. Think about that. Imagine the dumbest person you talk to, and half of Americans are dumber than that. It's crazy how dumb people actually are. Misquote. What was the actual quote, Serranos? Is it imagine the average? I think it's imagine the average American. Sorry. Think of the average American. By the way, the dumbest person you know is the average American. Most likely. But is that the right quote, Serranos? There you go. Okay, let me rephrase it. Imagine the average American, and half of them are dumber than that. There you go. By odds, 6 of those 6 jury members are below the average American's intelligence. By odds. Imagine that. It's a terrifying fucking thought, isn't it? That half of them are dumber than the average American just by stats alone. Anyway, there we go. All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out. Optimus Prime dying was definitely, literally an impactful situation on my life. I had the Transformers movie soundtrack on record, on LP, and I watched the Transformers movie basically every day from the time I turned 8 until the time I was 10. Catch you guys later. Have a good night. Peace. Peace.
Oh, he drinks a fair bit, but you realize that it just helps get his noggin jogging along. With his glass by his side and his kids asleep tight, we'll hear some lost-plaining tonight. With his microphone muted, we'll laugh at this boomer until he explains it's all part of the plan. Watch his face become redder as he becomes meta, raging at idiots from Twitterland. From the white shores of Maine to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the law better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we have now. Oh, his This lady is fair, and she handles herself with the grace of one who has borne many children. As the wife of a lawman, she makes sure that he has the time and the place to provide for them there. So pour out an art bag, a bow, more a love rug. The spirits flow as the ones who get unemployed. So pour out a glass for the tea, post on Twitter as we hear Lost Planning tonight. From the white shores of Nan to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the wrong better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we are now. Oh, the guests are all plentiful, from Dante to Drexel. They bring their perspective and spice to the mix. But the reason we're here and the one that we cheer is the one who is showcasing us his career. Get unemployed. So pour out a glass for the tea, post on Twitter as we hear Lost Planning tonight. From the white shores of Nan to the hills of Glenlivet, there's no one who explains the wrong better than Nick. So pour out a glass for the ones who have passed to make the law what we are.